CALP is part of CALP's Grand Bargain Cash work stream, but it's also the subgroup on linking cash, humanitarian cash and social protection. So my name's Emma Jowett. I'm going to be running at least 3 of these webinars. And the principal aim of this webinar today is to update the group on the status of the revised work plan and the process that has been undertaken this year to consult on the work plan. So Gabby Smith is going to be talking to you about that, about the work she's done and the final version that you should have all received. We're also going to be talking about the feasibility of the work plan and try and agree responsibilities for some areas that are not yet responsibilized. Zara Rizvi is going to be presenting the discussion note on knowledge management and learning in relation to social protection and humanitarian cash. And we also want to agree on and amend the work plan in relation to those activities that came out of that consultation process. And finally, Lois Austin is going to explain how case studies exploring themes related to COVID-19 and programming will be undertaken. And again, she'll be looking for volunteers and the direction that work can take. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing. What I would ask is if you could all mute. It seems to me, looking at the screens, that most people's are muted. But if you can mute unless you're talking. We are going to take a comfort break at about 3:30, so for about 15 minutes. So that'll give you a chance to get a cup of coffee or tea or whatever it might be. Firstly, I'd like the co-leads to introduce themselves, if that's okay. So Emily Henderson, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Emily, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Emily. So I'm Emily Henderson, humanitarian advisor for DFID, and with UNICEF and IFRC, I'm co-lead of this subgroup that started as part of the Grand Bargain Cash work stream a year ago. So very glad to be here and to have you all here. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. And Nupur, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody from New York. And I'm Nupur. I work with UNICEF in the social protection team. And I'm along with Emily from DFID and Caroline from IFRC. I'm one of the co-leads for this Grand Bargain subgroup. Over.
Great, thank you. And Caroline?
Thanks very much, Emma. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody, depending upon where you are. I'm Caroline Holt. I'm the Global Cash Lead at the IFRC and also a co-lead of this working group. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And what I'm going to do is just ask everyone to just very briefly introduce themselves. If you just give your name and which agency you're from. And I'm literally going to go along my screen. So I've got Julie Lawson McDowell. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Julie Lawson McDowell. I'm CALP's Research and Knowledge Management Advisor, lead on social protection. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Anna Volmecker.
Yeah, hi, my name is Anna Vollmecke. I'm working for GIZ for the Sector Initiative Social Protection.
Thanks. And Stephen Walsh. Stephen doesn't appear to be there. Andra.
Hi, I'm Andra Goulet. I'm the British Red Cross Focal Point for Social Protection and the co-chair of the Technical Working Group on Cash and Social Protection for the Red Crescent movement.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Stephen Walsh here.
Hi, Stephen. Which agency are you with?
USAID, Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, Agriculture Advisor.
Great, thank you. And then Thomas Burns.
Hi everyone, this is Thomas. I'm the Regional Economic Recovery Coordinator for Danish Refugee Council based in Amman.
Thanks. And Stephen. Stefan. No, okay. Catherine. with the difficult.
Hi, Catherine Titch, World Vision International, the Global Cash Voucher Programming Director, based in Nairobi. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And L. Douglas.
Hi, Lottie Douglas. I'm a Senior Advisor for Cash and Early Market Recovery for Mercy Corps, based in London.
Great, thank you. And Marianne?
If that is Marianne Wick, that's me, Save the Children Norway, Senior Humanitarian Advisor, Cash and Voucher Programming.
Great, thank you. And Paul?
Yes, good morning. It's Paul Reed. I'm a Policy Advisor in PRM, Office of Policy and Programs. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Aishwarya? You probably don't understand my pronunciation.
It's Aishwarya from WFP office in Geneva. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Filippo?
If that's Philippe Mougin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm leading the search team in CAFOD, which hosts our capacity on cash programming.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Actually, I had also Filippo Di Bari.
Hi, it's Filippo Di Bari. I'm the nutrition team leader at WFP Addis Ababa. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And Zara?
Morning, everybody from New York. My name is Zara Risby. I'll be one of the presenters. I used to be the person leading on or the consultant for this group on knowledge management and learning.
Well, thanks, Sarah. And then Stephanie Guha.
Hello, good afternoon. Stephanie Guha from SDC, Swiss Development Corporation, Policy Advisor, Poverty Leave No One Behind, based in Bern.
Great, thank you. And John Lamb?
Yeah, John Lamb, USAID Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, Acting Markets Team Leader. Over.
Thanks. And Dina Morad?
Sure. Hi, Dina Murad with WFP CBT team and also the co-convener for the cash workstream. Over.
Great, thank you. And Jean-Louis Lombo?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, rather, everyone. I'm Jean-Louis Lombo. I work at the ILO at the Social Protection Department. I'm a social protection specialist based in Geneva, and also focal point for the Grand Bargain on cash transfer and humanitarian work.
Great, thank you. And Kiara OM?
Hi everybody, it's Kira O'Malley here. I'm with Goal as their Global Cash Advisor. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sam from DFID?
Hi, this is Sam Brett. I'm a humanitarian advisor at DFID in the humanitarian policy team, and along with Dina, I'm one of the co-conveners of the overall cash workstream.
Lovely, thank you. And Davina H?
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Davina Hales. I'm a cash cap advisor supporting OCHA Geneva at the moment.
Thank you. And Juliet from OCHA?
Everybody, good afternoon. This is Juliet Lang, also from UNOCHA, working on cash coordination. Thanks. Oh, based in Geneva.
Thank you. And Ed Fraser?
Hi everybody, Ed Fraser. I'm the Global Advisor for Economic Recovery for the Danish Refugee Council based in London, and also the CVA focal point for the organisation. Thanks.
Thank you. And Rashid?
Hi, I'm the Global Roving Cash and Markets Manager for the Norwegian Refugee Council, currently based in Sudan.
Thank you. And Yasmin? I'll move on. Heather Kindness? Heather maybe isn't there either. Philippe Mougin?
Yeah, so I introduce myself from CAFOD and head of the search team.
Great, thank you. And Jackie Fries.
Hello, I'm here at the moment as the Cash Working Group Coordinator in Benin for CashCap.
Great, thank you. And Elizabeth Tromans.
Hi everyone, Elizabeth Tromans. I'm the Senior Technical Advisor for Cash and Emergencies at the International Rescue Committee based in New York.
Fabulous, thank you. And William Martin.
Hi everyone, my name is William Martin and I'm Economic Recovery and Market System Technical Advisor for USAID Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance.
Thank you. And Joe Burton. I didn't quite catch that, Joe, just to let you know that maybe your thing isn't working so well, but thank you. Claudia Patrone.
Hi everyone, I'm Claudia Patrone, Social Protection Consultant for FAO based in Rome.
Great, thank you. And I know I should know this name, but I can't remember. C. de la Cerda.
Hi everyone, this is Carla Lacerda. I'm with UNICEF. I'm the Cash Partnership Specialist for UNICEF based in Geneva, and I'm supporting this group on linking cash to social protection from the GB. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Caitlin Scott.
Hi everyone, this is Caitlin Scott, co-chair of the Cash Working Group in Somalia.
Thank you. And Claire O'Brien.
Hi, I'm Claire. I'm a Senior Advisor in the Social Protection Unit at World Food Programme headquarters in Rome.
Lovely, thank you. And I can't quite see this name, but I think it's Helene or Celine Sinitsky-Billard.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Celine Sinitsky-Billard. I'm working for Action Against Hunger based in Paris on cash and voucher assistance and social protection as advisor.
Great, thank you. Maria Karadenizli.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Karadenizli, based in Geneva with the UN Women's Humanitarian Unit. I'm also the technical coordinator of the Friends of Gender, the Grand Bargain Friends of Gender group. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. H. Boss. Was that H. Boss typing?
My name is Henry Boss, working for ZOA as cash specialist. I hope everyone hears me.
Yes, we do. Thank you. Who have we got? Helen Pasky.
Hi everyone, my name is Helen Pasky. I am Food Security and Livelihood Senior Advisor in Action Against Hunger, ACF, based in Madrid. Thanks.
Thank you. I can't remember. Caitlin Scott?
Caitlin Scott, co-chair of the Cash Working Group in Somalia.
Sorry, I'm probably done you.
Sorry.
Man. And Anna Nicol.
Hi everyone, this is Anna Nicole from the Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration and the Policy Team.
Thank you. Holly Radice.
You said my name correctly. That's amazing. I'm Holly Radice. I'm the Global Cash and Markets Technical Advisor at CARE and also the co-lead on the Gender and Cash Sub-Working Group. Thank you all who joined before.
Thank you. Jenny Weatherall.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenny Weatherall, one of the Global Cash and Markets Technical Advisors for Catholic Relief Services, CRS.
Lovely, thank you. Dick Sharana.
Hi everyone, I'm Diksha Rana. I look at policy for Calc MENA based in Oman.
Lovely, thanks. And Francisco Astudillo. Probably definitely pronounced that wrong.
Yes, you pronounced it correctly, actually. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francisco Astudillo. I come from IOM, and I'm working as a cash-based intervention consultant in Geneva.
Lovely, thank you. And Maria?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mireia Termes, and I'm the Economic Recovery Coordinator for the Danish Refugee Council in Iraq.
Thanks. And Nicola Peach.
Hi, everybody. This is Nicola Peach. I'm the Deputy in the WFP Headquarters Social Protection Team.
Lovely, thank you. And Tom.
Double Afghanistan Program Policy Officer and Cash Voucher Working Group Coordinator.
Great, thank you. And Yul McCreary.
Hi, I'm Humanitarian Policy Advisor, or sorry, no, for HOD, working on cash.
Lovely, thanks. And Laura Evans.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lara Evans. I'm the Social Protection Advisor in the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security at USAID. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Shawnee Hoover.
Hi, everyone. This is Shawnee Hoover, Senior Policy Advisor with the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance.
Thank you. And Gabby, I'm going to leave you and to introduce yourself in a moment. Glenn Hewson.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Glenn Hewson. I'm the Cash and Market Specialist in the Economic Security Unit of the ICRC based in Nairobi.
Lovely, thank you. And Rolf?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rolf Kogel. Until a few weeks ago, I was Food Security Coordinator for people in need in Northwest Syria. Thank you.
Thank you. And Maria Thorin.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I am the cash advisor at the humanitarian team at Swedish Corporation based in Stockholm.
Great, thank you. And Ndede? I think we might have to come back to that one. Mariano Gomez. Okay, I'm going to move on. Ali Mansour.
Hi, this is Ali Mansour from Cash Working Group South Sudan.
Thank you. And Marga Lido.
Margaledo, Cash Response Team from Cash Cap.
Thank you. And Larissa Pelham.
Larissa Pelham from Oxfam.
Thanks. And Sigrid Kulka.
Hello, everybody. I'm from ECHO, based in Nairobi.
Lovely, thank you. And Carolyn L. Okay. Julia Lewis. Okay, I think I've come to the end of various screens in front of me, and so I'd like to apologize for mispronouncing anybody's name, but thank you all very much.
Sorry, you missed me. I'm Shandor Shiposh World Bank.
Lovely, thank you. Sorry, Sandra, I didn't see your screen. It's a little complicated.
I had problems logging in Zoom, but now I am here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, welcome.
And also Stefan Amani from UNDP.
Lovely, thank you. And any others out there?
Hi, this is Jean Dede from NRC. I work in Kakuma, but I'm currently in Nairobi.
Great, thank you. Any more?
And hi, everyone. I'm Robin Nataf with DFID's Social Protection Team. Nice to be here.
Hi, Robin. Any final ones?
Hi, this is Oliver Westerman. I'm the Cash Transfer Advisor for Mercy Corps in Palestine.
Great, thank you. Any further?
Hi, this is Daphne Jayasinghe, Policy Lead on Economic Programmes at the International Rescue Committee, based in London.
Lovely, thank you. Any final people? Marvellous, let's get going. I want to say a really big welcome to everyone, and it's fantastic that this webinar is so well attended. I'm going to hand over now to Gabby Smith, and Gabby, you can introduce yourself, and Gabby's going to basically run through the process of consultation which resulted in the revised work plan that you've all seen. So Gabby, over to you.
Thanks, Emma. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. So I'm a consultant. I was hired by DFID earlier this year to support the subgroup on defining its work plan further. I'll give you a short summary of the consultation process and the revision process to arrive at the draft that's been shared with you to date. So the terms of reference of the subgroup, it envisages actions in 5 engagement areas, as you'll have seen. So there's the first engagement area is mapping, second on coordination, third on knowledge management and learning, a fourth on advocacy, and a fifth on guidance. And earlier last year, the subgroup convened its first face-to-face workshop that I think a number of you attended. And during that time, there was a tentative work plan that was drawn up for the subgroup, and it proposed a range of different activities that were under these 5 engagement areas. And some of these activities, member agencies, mainly the 3 subgroup co-leads, so DFID, UNICEF, IFRC, they committed to lead certain of these activities, and then for the rest there was no lead or contributing agencies that were assigned at that time. And so at the start of this year, the co-leads have funded my consultancy to update and refine that work plan for 2020-2021. And I should say this is obviously before everything that's transpired since with the COVID pandemic. And so the process I followed, I contacted all the subgroup members in the first quarter of this year by email. I requested them to engage in a call or to share inputs in writing. So 21 members have taken part in an interview, and 6 of the members have responded in writing to some questions that I shared. And you can get a list of those organisations in the notes tab in the Excel sheet that was shared with you in the work plan sheet. And a further 7 members responded that at that time they weren't in a position to input to the work plan because they weren't currently sort of ready to engage in that space, but they were highly interested in the topic, so they wanted to remain part of the subgroup and informed of its progress. And so in the consultations, members have shared the status of any activities that their organisation had previously committed to lead in 2019. They shared whether they'd worked on any other activities that were proposed in that initial tentative work plan. They indicated any interest to lead or contribute to the other proposed activities that are set out in that initial 2019 work plan. And then they provided details of other activities that they were planning that they felt might fit with the objectives and the engagement areas of the subgroup. And the members have also made recommendations on how the work of the group could be managed going forward. And so what we found is that these consultations, they've yielded common agreement really. There's consensus across members that the scope of the work that was initially proposed last year in the workshop that was set out at that time was a bit too ambitious and unrealistic. And also that some of the actions that were listed in that initial work plan were quite vague, so they weren't very well defined, in terms of a concrete activity or in terms of what you'd expect an end result to be from that activity. So for example, under coordination, there was an activity listed, work with national field staff to promote a collaborative approach, and people consulted were basically not clear as to what that would mean in practical terms. And if we compare the work plans actually of other subgroups, such as the cash and the gender subgroup, their work plans have a smaller number of quite clear, well-defined activities. There was also agreement that the activities that are listed under the work plan of the subgroup, they should demonstrate added value of the subgroup working collectively as a group to achieve results. And some of the actions that were listed at that time last year, they were basically pre-existing projects of particular members. So as an example, there was one listed under coordination that was add a module into the interagency social protection assessment on fragile settings. And that was actually already an ongoing action of, the members of the SPIAC-B group. So, people that were consulted were not really clear what additional contribution this subgroup could make to those sorts of activities. And then the final thing to note is that participants, they've suggested that the subgroup needs to be more actively convened than perhaps it was being before, so that members can regularly, be kept abreast of what's going on and communicated on progress of activities. And I feel this is how the other subgroups are presently also being managed. So there's some lessons there. Emma, do you mind going to the next slide? So the subgroup work plan draft that DFID shared with you last week, that's the output from these consultations. So it's responding to the feedback from the group members that it needs to be more focused, more strategic. And the aim now is to focus attention of the group on let's say a smaller number of more specific deliverables where the group can work together to achieve greater collective value. So I have removed any proposed actions from last year's, from 2019's work plan that were not already assigned a lead agency and that had not been started. So that basically includes all those actions that were described by members as being quite vague. And I've also removed those actions that were the ongoing activities of, as I said before, these individual subgroup members that were not connected in any way to the subgroup and that were not easily redefined as a subgroup activity. And I've also added some new proposed activities, and they are shown in red in the work plan that was shared with you. And these were proposed by subgroup members during the consultations, and they were also, many of them highlighted in a separate member consultation process that UNICEF funded for the knowledge management and learning engagement area. And Zara is going to give you more information on this soon during this call. And so for all activities that have already started, the work plan that's been shared, it provides you an update on their status and it gives you an idea of the timeline. And it also notes which organisations are going to take the lead role and which members are already or could contribute. And then for the activities that haven't started yet and the newly added ones, for the most part, a lead organisation is being proposed. It might just be worth mentioning what the co-leads of the group are proposing by leading an activity. So this basically means that an organisation is committed to spending the time that's needed to manage the activity and to coordinate the inputs from any other members that may be contributing to it as needed. And then for those, there's a few that you'll see down the work plan that they require some funding. A lead agency would also commit to proactively try to secure that funding. And for most of these activities down this work plan, all except one, we have this verbal commitment from the agency that's listed as leading. The only one is, I think it's activity 3.7, the one around the maintaining a roster of technical expertise. It's been proposed that that might be useful to sit with cash cap so that it could fit within an existing roster, and that in that way it would be more cost effective. But that has yet to be sort of discussed and confirmed. And maybe the last thing to mention in terms of the coloration on the work plan, so the grey timeline, that indicates those activity timelines that are confirmed, the things that are already ongoing and funded. And then the green timeline, it presents basically a provisional timetable for things that haven't started yet, or for actions that are funded this year and that could potentially continue next year if members here agree that this is going to be something useful to do. So, for example, the webinars that are currently funded under the KML thematic area. And during the session today, if there's any members here, any people on the call that think that there's other actions that are now missing from the work plan and that you think it's important to include, then I welcome inputs. All I would say is that please do keep in mind that this work plan as is, it's already the result of fairly detailed consultations, and we do need to keep the scope of the work plan manageable and realistic. So I will stop there and I'll hand back to you, Emma. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Zara. I'm sorry, Gabby.
It's all right.
Thanks a lot. What we'd like to do is just sort of have 5 minutes for questions for clarification. So anything you haven't understood that Gabby said about the process, now is your opportunity to ask a question. And then we'll go to some sort of wider reflections for discussion in a moment. So anybody need clarification or have a comment on the process?
Yes, I have one question. It's William from USAID BHA. On the process, in terms of consulting with the different stakeholders, I see it's a lot of humanitarian stakeholders, and we are a group to try to link humanitarian cash assistance with social protection. Is there any social protection, more development stakeholders that have been consulted into the process or not? Over. Thank you.
Gabby, can you answer that?
Yes, sure. So, yeah, I mean, just to be clear, the organisations I reached out to was every organisation that was shared with me by the co-leads on the email, on the group's email list, which is very broad, which does include many social protection stakeholders. And I reached out to organisations, multiple times. If you look at the notes column, the notes tab, I should say, on the work plan, you will see the agencies that did engage and that I had a conversation with, and you'll see that there are some on there that do work in the social protection space, World Bank being one, UNICEF being another, for example. But yes, I did reach out to every organisation that was on the initial mailing list.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Gabby, very much. What we wanted to do is just also ask the group if there are any sort of initial reflections on the revised work plan. Anything that leaps out at people as being out of place? Any objections? Reflect. Sure.
Emma, this is Claire here from WFP. May I
Yes, please.
it's a very general comment. First to say thanks so much for the Excel spreadsheet. It's really clear, which also helps guide the discussion. A point to throw in for a general discussion, if the subsequent intention is to go through sort of point by point and discuss what we think about the details, I wonder whether there's a kind of engagement area 0 before all of this, which is just to check again whether everybody in the group has the same understanding of whether this is an advocacy group or more of an analytical group. Because I think some of the messages that are coming out are about advocacy, and it hasn't always been clear to me from the different documents, from the terms of reference for this group, and then from the workshop report that was done from the first workshop last year, and also the meeting we had last year equivalent to this one. Sometimes it feels like that this is meant to be an advocacy group where we all agree what our common end goal is. And sometimes it feels to me it's a convening group where, people are allowed to have different views and we're exchanging what the different views are. So I would find it quite helpful to have clarity on whether all the agencies in the group have the same end goal in mind, and then to what extent we all have the same idea about what's the direction to reach that end goal, and also understand the divergences, and then clarify whether this work plan is a work plan for going forward on the bits on which we all have common agreement, or whether part of the work plan is to document the places in which we have differences. So just that kind of, before we get to engagement area 1, having that discussion about the clarity about whether we understand that we're all going in the same direction or whether we're actually trying to do a few different agendas. Mainly because I think some of these agendas are to do with how to make international systems link up better with national systems, and some people are talking more about how emergency response links better with development, and those are 2 slightly different policy debates. So understanding everybody's position on what they think the group is aiming for would be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That's a very large question, I think, in terms of getting the views of everybody here. I'm going to ask Emily or Nupur or Caroline if you can comment on Claire's sort of question around same direction of travel to reach the same end goal, and whether this is more advocacy or analytical leaning, this group. Would one of you be willing to comment?
Hi, this is Emily. So I will give a start to it, and of course invite Caroline and Nupur to chip in. But I think when we thought about this group, the recognition was that we needed a place for exchange, and to bring together the different experiences we have, the different perspectives we have. So I think we are very keen to make this a place of exchange and a place of bringing together our different experiences and perspectives, and starting from there. Which so maybe the latter in terms of what you were saying, Claire. However, that being said, it doesn't mean we cannot, from my perspective at least, identify a few common directions. I think given our roles, our different roles, our different mandates, etc., it might be maybe too much, or might not even be in the interest of anyone to kind of look for a common direction altogether. But on the contrary, to bring the diversity together, and for certain points where we have commonalities, where we see that we can push common messages, then do so. So I feel, for example, the one-pager that we developed together, it did highlight that we had different entry points into the topic, but it also showed that we have a common broad direction, and we were able to put together a paper that was a call for action. So that would be an initial perspective. I don't know if Nupur or Caroline, you want to jump in. Over.
I think, Emily, you've captured it quite well. This, as Emily said, Claire, you know it also better than me. There is a whole diversity of perspectives and entry points, and prior to this group, there were also many small little groups also, which were not really talking to each other. So this platform, we thought, was a platform to embrace that diversity, provide that speaking space, and bring in all the different views. Use different opportunities as they come, depending on what the group members feel at that stage. We, as Emily mentioned, we did talk about the one-pager and the four-pager. We had different views when we were working on it, but we found a solution and we moved on. So it really depends on how the group members want to take the group. Which direction they want to take the group at that particular time. So it's very open from our side. Over.
Thank you, Nupur. Caroline, anything final on that?
Yeah, thanks. So just to agree actually with obviously Emily and Nupur, I think we have quite a clear idea between ourselves of what it is. It was actually called for, of course, by the cash work stream of the Grand Bargain as an area that we needed to address or start to understand. So a common ground, and I think that the work plan actually that Gabby has developed and prepared starts to look now at some more solid aspects of that, which bring together the evidence of this hugely diverse group of people that are part of this group. Those case studies will now start to bring some evidence, and then this group should also feel empowered enough to start talking about the direction in which we go. But initially, identifying that space for the conversation was something that was missing in the Grand Bargain cash work stream, and it was identified by the members that this would be a good approach. So possibly not the hard answer that you want, Claire, but I think we are evolving as we move forward, and this for me is a very important space to have those conversations. Thanks.
Thank you, Caroline. Claire, does that answer your sort of comment?
Yes, fantastic. That sounds great. And I think it just means that as we're going through the work plan, we can look for those opportunities of where we're like documenting diversity. So for example, once we get to the kind of the advocacy engagement area, we can also think whether it needs an equivalent on whether we want to have some work that is about discussing risks and challenges and when we wouldn't do these things. Because the Grand Bargain commitment was actually to make these linkages when feasible and appropriate. And I think there is a whole ton of work that it'd be really great to do about if we all discuss when we think it's feasible and appropriate. So absolutely, if there's opportunities to do that and opportunities to map different agency positions and not just map cases, then that would be perfect. So great, thanks a lot for the clarification.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks for raising that. I did want to ask, so Claire, also in response to what you raised, whether we were going to go through activity by activity, we will hope to deal with as many activities as we can. I think we're going to prioritise new activities, and in just one moment, Zara is going to look at the activities under the engagement area of knowledge management and learning. But before we move to that, I would just like to ask if any of the people attending have got progress reports on any of the activities. So no progress from anyone.
Hi, sorry, Julie here from CALP. Just to say that the revisions to our training, our capacity building work are going ahead. They are funded, which I think is an update on the work plan.
Okay, great. Oh, good. That's activity 5.2. Okay, lovely. Thank you for that, and we'll come back to that one at a later point. One thing I did want to ask, leading on from that, is activity, the very first activity, which I believe is activity 0, which is the coordination of the subgroup. So I wanted to sort of get confirmation from everyone on the need for that group coordination activity, which is funded until October 2020 and then would need funding. And the proposal is that DFID has coordinated it till now and that UNICEF would take over from October 2020. So if you have, I think the best way to do this is if you have an objection to that, perhaps you could raise that now. Otherwise, we'll assume that the group does agree that there is a need for this activity. The sweet sound of agreement. I hope I'm reading that right. Okay, we're going to move on now. We're going to move to the engagement area 2, which is the knowledge management and learning. And Zara, I'm going to ask if you could give us the background on the work you've been doing on that. And then perhaps we can look in more detail at some of the activities related to it in the work plan. Zara, over to you.
Thank you. I have about 15 minutes. First, I just want to point out that I've put a link in the chat box because we're going to talk quite a bit about the discussion note, and I'd like people to be able to follow along, even though the discussion note was sent out from with the invite. I think there's people who may not have received it or whatever it might be. I'm going to leave that live on my Google Drive just for this meeting, and then I'll take it off, and there'll be a different way for everybody to be able to access the discussion note. Thanks for that introduction, and with the many different screens that I have up right now, you'll see me looking in many different directions. I am Zara Rizvi. Last month is basically from October onwards till last month, I was doing the knowledge management learning expert position with the Grand Bargain subgroup, just because there is some, I don't want to cause any confusion. I'm currently now working with UNICEF in MENA, but the co-leads asked me to come back to be able to present the history and to be able to show everybody where the knowledge management priorities have actually come from. So the April 2019 meeting that happened, and I did post the link for that report as well, so people can go back and see where all of this stuff is actually coming from. Knowledge management was one of the areas of priority that was listed. UNICEF committed in that meeting to resourcing and leading on this activity. Isabel Pally and myself were hired to take on the work in October 2019, as I mentioned, and as you can see, the consultancy that Isabel and I were doing, we had the objectives to assess the knowledge management learning needs of humanitarian practitioners including which appropriate products there are and which platforms we could be using in order to get the information out to people. The result of this quite big process was the discussion note. Those consultations that took place October, I think it was mostly in November that these consultations took place. Subgroup members were involved to be able to, we reached out to subgroup members. We did about 18 key informant interviews, and these were representatives from the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement, INGOs, donors, UN agencies, and we also had separate discussions with CALP and socialprotection.org on the knowledge management platform side of things. We did use an analysis framework, which was, we took the OPM work around shock responsive social protection, and CALP had done this piece of work, I think it was back in 2016, on looking at cash and safety nets, I believe it was called at that time. And we took that so that we could have some sort of an analysis framework and figure out what are the different key priority areas that are gaps for humanitarian practitioners in this, in the area of linking social protection or linking humanitarian cash transfers to social protection. We also, as part of the consultancy, began some of the knowledge management learning work, and many of you have participated or co-hosted with us the different webinars and discussion threads that we've been having. That all started in December of 2019. And the last thing that was part of that original consultancy was to make recommendations and a draft action plan for knowledge management and learning. The draft action plan, as we've already mentioned before, and we will be discussing, that has been incorporated in the work that the larger work plan for the subgroup, and Gabby will be talking about that later. Based on the basis of what we had already established, we were actually able to ramp up very, very quickly for COVID. The main parts of our consultancy, for Isabel and myself at least, were pretty much done by end of February, I would say. And I just sort of continued on doing some of the webinars and whatever it might be. And COVID happened, and it actually gave us a really great opportunity to test quite a few of the knowledge management products that we had. And because of the work that we had already done, so much of it with subgroup members, we were able to ramp up very, very quickly. As people may know, Lois Austin has taken over the position as of a month ago. I think she's probably in her 4th week by now, or 5th week by now. And we've got different products and things like that, which we can talk about in a little bit. If I can get the next slide, because I'd like to be able to walk people through. These were the main knowledge management needs for humanitarian practitioners that we were able to come up with, or that we were able to figure out. And I just want to highlight for people where in the discussion note you would be able to find this, and it is page 3 or page 2 of the actual discussion note, page 3 of the PDF, and it gives you a lot more details around the information that Isabel and I had put together. The stuff in purple is what we were calling foundational themes. And really this was, you know, what are the different concepts in terms of what is social protection? How do we think about a life cycle approach? What are social transfers versus cash transfers? So just a lot around terminology and what are basically the concepts. Also for humanitarian practitioners, it was the big one, options for linking. And I think again, with COVID, we've been able to see like this remains a gap. And then there's this thing around institutional environment, which I think is super interesting because it also came up in the CALP study by institutional environment, sorry, I should say. What we mean by that is the need for humanitarians to better understand government's mandates and responsibilities, and both social protection and humanitarian informants that we spoke to talked about this as a foundation for collaboration between both sectors. And as I was saying, we had co-hosted a webinar with CALP. I think it was in May. Julie can let me know. I think it was May 16th that we did this for their high-level report that they had done on social protection and cash. And this was one of the main concepts that was also coming out, is the need for humanitarians to actually be able to understand who is government, how do you work with government, what does this look like. The other categories, and please ignore the colors, it was just we were trying to link what products, such as a webinar or a discussion thread or a case study, like which one of these topics would better suit that. But basically, these are I don't think any of these are a surprise, like, you know, humanitarian practitioners need more information on coordination, transfer values, what data management looks like, what are the different financing options. What I do want to do, which is not in the discussion note because that was pre-COVID, since COVID, because we did with since March, since mid-March, do a very, very light touch sort of update on what are the needs that are emerging now for humanitarian practitioners. And leadership and coordination is still a big one, to talk about delivery and payment mechanisms and how to link to those and what to look at in terms of that. Joint funding is a huge one that comes up in, or has been coming up in, so many different conversations. And again, the need for humanitarian and development actors to understand how each side functions, which I've also mentioned. But I just wanted to be able to highlight from this word cloud, like what are the big ones that we are now seeing. These needs are highlighted in the webinars and newsletters, case studies, like that's where we're seeing them as immediately relevant to be able to address. We can indeed go to the next slide. Thank you. As part of our assessment, we also took a look at different knowledge management and learning platforms, and just so that I can take people through this, that would be page 5 of the discussion note. Is it page 5 of the discussion note? It is. We did look at a range of different platforms and forums. The two most obvious ones that we dug into deeper were CALP and socialprotection.org. They do function separately because socialprotection.org is literally just a platform, and they are not content producers in the same way that CALP is also producing content, doing capacity building, doing trainings. We also took a look at ALNAP, the Red Cross, Red Crescent Cash Hub. As we're talking about forums, we took a look at the BASIC facility as well that DFID funds to see what was happening with that. We looked at the World Bank, what kind of forums do they have. But we dug deeper into CALP and social protection, because one of the major objectives of this piece of work was also to bring together and to bridge between the protection and the humanitarian. The products that we looked at on the knowledge management and learning side were the ones that you can see on the screen in front of you. Webinars, which we know that we've been doing and we plan to continue to do them throughout the year. We have collaborated with so many of the subgroup members on here in terms of co-hosting or bringing your examples to life, amplifying the work that you are doing. Discussion groups, which I personally have mixed feelings on, but they're still a part of what we would, or what the subgroup would like to see. We've done face-to-face events, which, or we have not done these, but this was part of our recommendation that we take a look at it. But obviously this is going to be a bit different now. But I know that Gabby has incorporated it in a way within the work plan. Training, newsletters, standards, tools and guidance, specialized technical support, an evidence library, like a repository, some sort of a space for collaborative research, mapping, and then we also at the end looked at blogs, podcasts, and social media. These were some of the main ways in which we heard the key informants telling us, and from our own research, that you know, it's a good way to get knowledge management, to do knowledge management, to disseminate the learning, to get materials out there. What we did do was we took each one of these products and put a high-level action against it. And that is on page of the discussion note. You'll be able to find that. And again, because it's just a lot more efficient, and our work took place before the consolidation of the work plan, the overall work plan. So Gabby has integrated many of these activities within the work plan. with the next slide, I just wanted to put this out there. And again, you will find it in the discussion note. One of the things that the co-leads had also asked us to do was to look at a theory of change around, what can knowledge management work look like? What should we be aiming for, looking at? And we took the impact statement, and I'm so sorry that this slide is not necessarily messy, but it's a little bit small. I'm hoping, and Judy can corroborate if this is still true. The impact statement, we took it from the State of the World's Cash Report 2, which is coming out. It's being launched on Thursday, in fact. So Julie can put that link in the chat box and people can sign up for the launch. But yeah, so we wanted to make sure, again, because this is a subgroup and we work we're linking to ongoing initiatives as much as possible. So the impact statement is looking at the links between humanitarian programs and existing social protection systems, legislation, and infrastructure to ensure that this is happening and infrastructure are built to the greatest extent possible. I would like to ask people to take a look at the preconditions, which, because of COVID, actually, most of these preconditions have been met. We do have a point which is low, because you do need somebody absolutely driving the process forward. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And we did do a light touch on refining audience needs, but this is an area where at least Isabel and I felt like we needed a little bit more work to figure out what are the audience needs and how that can work for people. There are ongoing discussions with CALP and SP.org on the different knowledge management products. We have an agreement or are about to have an agreement, and if we can confirm on this with the SP.org, at least on the webinars and how we work with them on that. And I do know at least a month ago, we were in conversation with CALP around how do we link up better, because nobody wants to duplicate, and how does it all fit into the work plan. As Julie already mentioned, training and capacity building work is happening, 5.2 of the existing work plan. So so much of this is about how do we all work together and what do we do. It would be good to discuss the outcomes listed and see if they still work for people. None of it, at least from the perspective of Isabel and myself, we didn't think any of it was hugely controversial. And it's a bit difficult with the knowledge management work when it's not as tangible to say what are the outcomes that we are trying to go for. And again, a reminder, this is very much geared towards humanitarian practitioners. So that is how we've looked at the outcomes as well. Outputs, I think we left that blank because it very much depended on the work plan and what people or agencies sign up for and what they want to be able to do. Newsletters were not part of the plan. I'm looking at my notes, sorry. Yeah, but then we just have the activities listed, which I've already gone through. And I think that should pretty much, that should wrap up the work that we had done to date on it. And I'm sorry I've run through it really, really quickly as well, but I feel like quite a few people were part of or agencies at least, were part of the consultations. I'm super excited to see quite a few cash working groups that are on this call right now, because the discussion part, Emma, if we can go to the next slide, please, does have...
Sorry, Andrea, could you take it back one? Zero, your slide with the questions isn't there, so do you have that to hand?
I do, and I can just ask people the questions. So basically we now have, and Emma will correct me if I am wrong, I was meant to take 15 minutes, which I'm amazed that I've managed to just do that in 15 minutes, because it was 9 months of work in 15 minutes. But now I believe we have 25 minutes for discussion, and we would just like to first open it up for any questions of clarification on the process, if something is not clear, and then just to ensure that this is broadly reflective of people's or agencies' experience, so that we have that sort of endorsement or validation that yes, we are in fact moving in the correct direction with the knowledge management work that we have been doing, and that many of you have experienced through the newsletters, through the webinars, through the discussion threads that we've had going. And then we absolutely wanted to open it up in terms of, you know, which are priority activities and what kind of sequencing we could be looking at with that, because that will help Gabby later when putting together or it'll help us better in the work plan section when we start looking at that. But also to understand what are agencies doing to share the different knowledge managed learning activities with your regional and country colleagues. Do we have any good practice on this? I'll come back to that question, but I would really, really like to dig into it, because this was something really strongly coming out in our key informant interviews. Like, this is for the practitioners. Is the information actually getting out to our practitioners? With that, I'd like to open it up for any questions of clarification. And you can do the hand raise thing on the chat bar, but if we don't have questions of clarification, I'm sure I wasn't that clear. But hopefully having the discussion note to hand has helped do that. And I am not seeing any questions coming up. If there are questions and people have been unable to unmute themselves or whatever it might be, please feel free to put it in the chat box there and we can take it on from there. This, I would like some sort of an understanding from people, and you can either unmute yourself. So the next question that we have is this broadly reflective of your experience right now in terms of, is this what we actually need? Does it make sense on the acknowledgement on the KML side that we continue down this path, and how we've been doing it based on what you've been able to hear from this presentation, the history of where it's actually coming from, and I guess having seen and experienced the work that we have been doing on this so far. And this, if you can be typing it into because I mean, the co-leads need that good steer in terms of making sure this is something that we continue to resource in the manner in which we are.
Yeah, perhaps I have a comment, William, from USAID BHA. I wonder, do you see, it's a really an open question, do you see this also as an opportunity to engage with governments on social protection in terms of, you know, trying to assess the level of engagement, or, you know, as an incentive or something to create this engagement? Do you see that as an opportunity or not, this KML work?
Me personally, yes. But this isn't about me. I'll ask the co-leads, but I guess specifically Nupur. I should have said that, yes, UNICEF has been leading since May. DFID has actually been funding the piece of work. But Nupur, over to you on that one.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, William, for the question. I think this is really, and this really links with the question that Sarah asked towards the end of her presentation about how is all this being shared? Because in the Grand Bargain subgroup, there are only so many people, and most of us are from the HQ, from all our agencies. But the work actually happens in countries. And how is this being shared with colleagues in the countries, and how useful is it for the colleagues in the countries who are actually engaging with governments? So yes, we would like agencies to engage with the governments on this issue, and that's something which is really a question for the group members. How is this being used? On the other side, the way we are engaging with governments on this knowledge management piece is through the various pieces of work. So for example, the webinars, and if I'm not mistaken, the next one will probably have somebody from the government speaking. So there are different levels of engagement. Again, it sounds a bit cliched, but it really is about how the group wants to use it and how the group wants to engage with government on this. At this grand bargain subgroup level, we do not have, we do not have implementing countries here in the subgroup. But that's a question for the larger subgroup members. Whether we should open the group up a bit more to include more members. And that goes beyond knowledge management, I would say. I don't know whether I've answered the question, William, but that's the thought process as of now.
Yeah, no, that's answer the question. That's why I think it's smart, because I don't know position of this group on including governments or not in the subgroup, but at least I think engaging and assessing the level of engagement through the KML could be strategic for this group. But yeah, it's answering the question. Thank you very much.
Yes, maybe a comment.
Yes, Shandor.
If I raise my hand.
If I recognize the voice, yeah.
Thank you, Zara. Yes, okay. This is.
It was not Shandor.
Sorry.
It was not Shandor.
No, this is Shandor speaking now. Yes.
Yeah, this was Shandor. Yes.
Oh,
exactly.
Sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay. No, go ahead. I didn't indicate.
It's Jean-Louis. Sorry. Yes, I only know people's voices from the different calls we used to have. But yes, I believe Jean-Louis, you are trying to give input.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and sorry for raising my hand together with another member, Sandor. But okay, just going forward with the same, question as before from the USAID. I think that indeed this takes us back a bit in the discussions we had around the position paper we developed together, and that was quite interesting. And I get a feeling that again we are now in a discussion or reflection that is very much geared towards the humanitarian side, and you could usefully embark a bit more the systemic aspect, especially in terms of feeding into the recovery phase. So just to mention it, well, I think that's one point that should be addressed globally in the knowledge products, and especially at the level of evidence at this moment. Just to mention that the ILO is currently a bit slow, the ILO, so it takes a long time to produce things. It's a normative organization, but we are at the moment working on a position paper on cash transfer, as the organization has moved towards implementing cash transfer. So that will probably take some more time. There are already a couple of drafts going around, but it's interesting because it positions as well cash transfer in the perspective of the national social protection system, and therefore offers a perspective on how should a government connect with the humanitarian cash transfers, which I believe is a really important topic that I do not see so much in filigrane in this presentation. So from the ILO, you can expect obviously an engagement on this topic. And I would suggest maybe to strengthen a bit this aspect overall. Over to you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Would you like to take Shandor now?
No, friends, I did not indicate, I didn't wave, but I think that the work program makes a hell of a good sense. So we support it from the World Bank point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I do want to point out, because this came up actually quite a bit, it's all coming back. November feels like it was a lifetime ago at this point. It is coming back, but quite a few people, the key informants and stuff, were like, okay, we understand that you're looking at the humanitarian practitioners, but there's a range of different actors that we need to be engaging in order to be able to do this work properly and look at what are their knowledge gaps. And I would like to point out, again, in the discussion note, it's page 4 or 5, but we collected what people said. Yes, we kept the humanitarian practitioner focus, but obviously people were giving us information. So we did make a small table within that said, here are the other priority audiences that have been discussed or talked about, including social protection actors, government actors, both on the National Disaster Management Agency side and the Social Protection Agency side. So there's a range of donors, you know, and we try to link and say, these are the different sorts of learning needs for these audiences. And this is why we keep saying ongoing refinement of knowledge management learning audience needs. And one of the things, and Nupur can correct me if I can't remember this correctly now, but because when we had brought this up with the co-leads, they were just like, we understand there's a much bigger audience here, but let's start with this and build a proof of concept that something like this can actually also work. And then you can start seeing resourcing coming in behind that, saying, okay, so let's look at other audiences and what their needs are and how do we resource that and what do we look at. I'm going to open it up to the co-leads quickly to see if they have any comments on what's been said. Any co-leads?
Nothing to add from us. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then what I will do is answer Claire's question while I paste the questions here in the chat box so that everybody can see what the different questions are. Claire, your question is the differences between the list on the current slide and the Excel spreadsheet. Does the Excel spreadsheet take precedence? And yes, the Excel sheet does take precedence. The Excel sheet is the overall work plan for the subgroup, and what Gabby has done is incorporated quite a few of the activities that you see listed here into the overall work plan for the subgroup, and that is the discussion that we will be getting into a little bit later. It is, I'm going to actually go ahead and post, the question. If people, and we wanted to do this as a quick fire 5-minute situation, if we can, in terms of the priority activities and any sequencing, because it would be good to understand as part of a work plan, and also for the work that Lois is going to be taking forward, which one webinars will continue. They're once a month, so they're kind of easy. Newsletters, as of right now, my understanding is they are still weekly. Till that changes, they will continue. But in terms of the other activities that people are seeing that are part of the work plan as well, is there any priority ones that people that are jumping out at people that, you know, we really must get to, or that we have to prioritize, and when that might, when that should be happening? Case studies is another one that we do have on the list of things that will happen. But if people have any quick sort of comments on that, anything that may be jumping out. From Lara. Lara, do you want to go ahead and just unmute yourself, if it's possible to share?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I've participated in most of your webinars and I have loved them, so thank you for that. But just to say, yeah, no, I think, you know, I know the emphasis is sort of looking at the humanitarian side, but I do appreciate, and now I lost where it was, in your report, the bullet about, you know, sort of government agencies and how to make social protection systems shock responsive. Because I think that's really also a space where this goes in, and I think we got to lean in from both sides. How do these systems make space, you know, for expansion vertically, and how does HA connect? So I think it's a two-way street. But anyway, you know, mapping sort of where this is happening, producing evidence of what's worked well, And developing tools and guidance, I think, are sort of three critical ways to do that. I know there's tons of discussion in this space and people are very interested in it, but I think it would be super helpful to get some sort of tangible things that are happening. And there are some really amazing examples that have been shared throughout these series of webinars that I think just sort of, capturing that in a tangible way and sharing, this is what Botswana is doing. For example, they are doing a complete review of their social protection system from the 1960s forward and identifying that each program had been in response to a shock. That's how that program had been developed. And now they're looking at a more comprehensive system that looks at the life cycle. I think these are just great examples of ways that can be adapted on each side. So mapping it, documenting it, and creating tools, I think, are just great ways to move forward. So thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Super useful, actually. That's the kind of feedback, and I know in the bi-weekly calls that we would have on knowledge for this subgroup, and knowledge management would always come up. We were constantly asking for feedback, because if it's not working in terms of us being able to put a product out there, like, let's not do it. So thank you for sharing that. Catherine, and I know your signal doesn't hold up that much or that well, but do you want to try at least with the audio? Because it's always
I will try with audio. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I would like to just highlight what was said before around the national government actors. I do think we sometimes overlook that national governments have humanitarian branches and arms, for example, national disaster management agencies that actually implement cash transfers, whether it's part of a larger social protection mechanism or it's just humanitarian life survival assistance. So I do think definitely we should look at, in all the priorities we put, and I've put some suggested there as well, the evidence base, we should look at putting the voices of national government representatives and also their experiences around this into the work we do, whether that is webinars or collating evidence research pieces, as well as further developing how-to standards and guidances. So that's just to re-emphasize what was said before. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I've also seen the note from Jackie, and it actually segues us beautifully into the next bit of the discussion, because I think we have 13 minutes left. Emma, you will let me know if that is correct. But I still have 13. Thank you. But basically, what are agencies doing to share these knowledge management learning activities? This came up so strongly in the key informant interviews, and the comment that we have from Jackie right now, who is working in Benin with the cash working group over there, is, it's a majority French speaking, or it is French speaking, and in terms of translating, etc. But so much of this is about how do we actually get the information out. So we would love to hear from members ideas around this, or how they have managed to get the information out. And now that I've moved to a regional role and I have to think about this myself in terms of what is the easiest way for me to be able to condense the information, or what are people able to do in terms of getting the information out to the actual practitioners. But you can also be sliding it to the government if you've got, those relationships, or to your social protection colleagues, whatever it might be. So I'd like to open it up to see how you guys have been able to do it. And Jackie, if you can unmute yourself for a quick second, because it sounds like you have actually been doing it.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. Yes, so in Benin, it's been a case of reducing everything to bite-sized chunks, and using sound bites, using, PowerPoints with only 3 slides, summarizing some of the key points, really trying to funnel down the bigger stuff that's coming out of the knowledge management stuff into more bite-sized chunks, and then following it up and enticing the cash working group members who are mainly development actors and mainly working with government the whole time, and are very limited in their exposure to humanitarian ways of working, to realize that they can incorporate things on a day-to-day basis. They don't have to wait for 3-year program cycles to start incorporating best practice. So I would say I've only been in the job for the last 2 months. That's really been the tactic, just reducing everything to bite-sized chunks so that it's more digestible, and trying to get more interest that way, because it can be a bit overwhelming.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Ali Mansour, South Sudan. I believe you are South Sudan Cash Working Group, and I'm so sorry to just call on you like this, but nobody else has raised their hand. But it would be interesting to also understand from your perspective, and this is, you know, I love that we've got people from countries. I see Mary as well, and hopefully I'm not going to get this wrong. I think, Mary, you are doing Somalia WFP out there connected to the Cash Working Group. Also, there was somebody else who was also, yeah, but basically it would be wonderful to hear from our country level colleagues who have signed on right now in terms of what is the best way for you to actually be getting the information as well. So Ali, if you are still there and able to unmute, because I know people also just, oh, you're there, go for it.
Thank you. As you know, Zara, we had some discussions about like this mapping exercise, and we have very limited partners who are actually doing the social protection in South Sudan, which include DFID and WFP, and also UNOPS through World Bank and UNICEF. We have very limited partners, so we do like monthly meetings regularly. Apart from that, we are currently, we share this mapping exercise as well with the partners, and we collect data, but it is very limited. As far as now, since the COVID happened, we didn't have any meeting, and because it is chaired by the Ministry of Gender, and due to some of the technical issues, they couldn't do any meetings. So I can say that, it's very limited in South Sudan. It's not that much in scale. So we have limited opportunities. We have limited resources as well. So that's why it's not actually an ideal social protection group right now.
Great. And what can this group be doing to support, at least on the, I guess, overall, but on the knowledge management learning side, definitely. What can we be doing to make it easier for people in the field? Because at the end of the day, that's what we are all trying to work towards.
We have recently, we discussed with Marga as well, who is a CRT from CashCap on the social protection capacity building. So the capacity building is the first priority, because we have very, as I told you, that the government is very new on this system, and government has not launched anything yet. So we need a lot of capacity building for the government partners, and we need a lot of knowledge management sharing with the partners. So we have already, we were working with Marga on the finding out what are the different online courses for now, which we can provide to the, especially for the government officials. We can provide to those group members. And the second thing, we requested that if there are some available resources or resource persons who can do some online sessions with the social protection groups, that will be really beneficial. And apart from that, we are working on this MIS system where we are working on the data sharing, and we requested also Marga, and we also request to this group that if we get some technical knowledge and there are some resources on the data sharing, that will be really helpful for us. So we are using the DFID help desk, which is the space provided by DFID, which is thanks to DFID that we are using it now. But still, we need a lot of capacity building. We need a lot of knowledge sharing from this group. Yes, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And that's number 7 on the slide. Space has, yeah, we've received great feedback around specialized technical support and what that looks like. But to continue with field folks on this call, if you have, ways to share in which we can actually be useful and not our own echo chamber at the top. I do believe we have colleagues from Somalia on this call, so it would be great to hear from you guys or others, or if you are working with field folks on a regular basis.
Yeah, from Somalia side, I would second that suggestion about focusing on the capacity building for different audiences as well, including government officials, for existing officials, and also some programs are coming on board that will involve hiring new government officials who will haven't worked in this sector before potentially, so would be very happy to have those capacity building opportunities. I would also say in terms of the webinars and other documents that are published, really highlighting case studies and field examples of what is being covered in these principles, because those are that would make it easier to kind of see how it could play out in the context that the field staff consuming these products are working in.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else? And we can also go from country to region if we have, yeah, regional folks who are also supporting different country offices. Nope. Okay, very good. I'm not seeing anybody unmuted at this time. And just to quickly say, Stephen Walsh, I've seen your comment on the case study. Was it Zimbabwe? Also, Lara, have seen your comment on Latin America and the Caribbean islands. And thank you, Claire, for posting the OPM studies that WFP has been, that they've been doing jointly, and CALP has actually done quite a bit around this. It was just normal CVA stuff, but they also, anyways, there is loads happening in the Caribbean, which most people ignore because humanitarian actors are not out there in spades, but lots of stuff happening over there. Anybody else? Yep, thank you, Mary. Caitlin has in fact shared the Somalia experience, and we have about 4 minutes left. And is there, Lottie, I'm so sorry to call on you, and you can just pretend that, you know, you're just not there or your connection is really bad or whatever, but I know Mercy Corps has been doing quite a lot of work around this and supporting your field offices. A lot of great materials coming out from the Mercy Corps side. So Mercy Corps or DRC, because I would love to hear from the NGOs on this side of things as well, like what are the kinds of products that are being asked for from your field offices? Is there a way for us to be linking with the stuff that you guys are producing, with the stuff that's happening here, so that we're not duplicating? Because one of the big major problems that we started having with the ramp up of COVID is that we were duplicating a lot of efforts, and it's, you know, why duplicate if we don't have to? So Lottie, over to you.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We're trying to do our best to coordinate the work that we've got on. So I think echoing what Caitlin said, we've been trying to respond to kind of concrete, practical examples of linkages, which has been in response to what our field teams have been wanting, to kind of see, when we talk about linkages, they're really important. Okay, but what does that really look like? So that's been one aspect of the work that we've had going on. Another piece that we are working on still is really kind of a deep dive into some of the work that we did as a part of the CCI with IRC, NRC, DRC, and Oxfam as well in Iraq. And that really takes you through the whole story of how we identified linkages. So the process of getting there, which I think is a slightly different but really valuable take on it. So that's something else that we have going on at the moment.
Okay. Any other NGO perspective or Red Cross, because there are quite a few colleagues from ICRC here as well. Sorry, Emma, I'm going to go 2 minutes over, but I do want to give a chance to make sure that we are hearing the range of our partners on here.
Maybe I can share something about the work that has been done in partnership with the Red Cross, Red Crescent Cash Hub, that has also organized webinars, and one of the subject was linking cash and social protection in this time of COVID, sharing experiences and also experiences from the Caribbean, linking with one of the comments that was there. And also through the newsletter that the Cash Hub sending out, there's also the information that you have been produced has been shared. And we will have this week or next week, there will be a new section in the Cash Hub that will be specific for social protection, and will link with the CALP and ASP.org to share the documents and the materials that have been produced. And also we have been producing as part of the work that is doing the technical working group on cash and social protection for the movement. We have produced 3 documents that will be like the first to be shown in the new section, and it's a guidance for Red Cross national societies, how to engage with social protection, and 2 more specific on advocacy in the COVID context, and how to link the responses in COVID and social protection for the guidance for the national societies.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Sarah.
And I'm seeing things coming up from, because as many people probably know, we've got the CCD, which is the Collaborative Cash Delivery Network. It's many different NGOs. I thought I had seen Larissa on here. Larissa Pelham is the person who is their focal point on the social protection cash side of things. There's a lot of great stuff happening in the chat box. Unless somebody has something burning, I'm going to do like a teeny tiny wrap up over here. If you have something burning, please unmute yourself, because we would love to hear from you. I don't see a burning.
Hi, Zara. I'll just jump in. Diksha. So yeah, you were asking about the regional perspective, and as you know, we have that regional event coming up next Tuesday on 28th July on linking social protection and humanitarian cash in MENA. And as a part of our panel discussion, of course, you're very much a part of that panel, but we have a multi-stakeholder panel which has people like Zara from UNICEF and WFP, World Bank, DFID Yemen, the government of Jordan, as well as the Lebanese Red Cross Society. So yeah, if you're interested in hearing the regional perspective on this, do register. I put the link in the chat box. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as a wrap up for this session, what we have heard is, that it makes sense what we are doing on the knowledge management. I have not heard anything that says like, stop doing what you're doing. It's just more ideas are coming forward, which I'm sure Lois is taking really great notes around in terms of what we're looking at. Stephen, there's a lot of amazing information you're putting out for case studies, which Lois will be talking about later. But a lot what we've heard in terms of what is useful and what the field is looking for and needs, not just the field, but regional HQ levels as well, is mapping. That's a really big one, and my understanding is it is remaining on the overall work plan. Evidence through case studies or other sorts of methods, but making sure that we are documenting what we are doing so that, again, we can share it through the webinars as well. That was brought up by Lara. Having things that are bite-sized. This is super important. So number 11, blogs, podcasts, social media. This was a big one. People talked a lot about having bite-sized things, but I'm not sure where that fits within the work plan right now, but we can discuss it. But I think that is an important thing. Short videos, which CALP was producing some videos recently and stuff, but yeah, short videos, bite-sized, translated is also a big, big thing. So when we're thinking about resourcing and what we want to do as part of our overall work plan, that's a good one to take into consideration. Capacity building is another big one, big, massive request from the field. And it is, as we heard from Julie, capacity building and training is happening. It is section 5.2 within the work plan. And I'm going to make a massive plug over here to begin with, because one of the things that Isabel and I felt very, very strongly about is that in order to, and it was I'm not sure how it's being reflected in the work plan right now, but we're going to talk about that, is have a competency framework, because one of the things that everybody talks about is a mixed profile person. Somebody who understands both the social protection side and the humanitarian side. And we're seeing more and more of these people, but what is that competency framework? So before you start rolling out training, what are you actually training to? So having that framework sorted out from the beginning is hopefully something that this group thinks is useful to invest resources in and to make that happen. And non-duplication, this is my last point, and then I swear I'm getting off of this. Non-duplication, and to be able to share all the information so that we can be looking at what everybody is doing and not going off and producing our own things, etc. Also, just sharing of information. I know from having done the newsletters, I'm sure Lois is dealing with this as well. Please share. Email her. We can put her email in the chat box, because the newsletter, turns out a lot of people read the newsletter, and it's great to be able to get your resources out there, amplify the work you're doing, but also to ensure there is no duplication happening then, because if you've already done it, there's no need for somebody else to do it. So why waste resources that way? But please email her with your staff so that she can put it inside the newsletter instead of her having to go and search for it. And with that, thank you very much. Emma, over to you. It was wonderful to be able to come back. I have missed this group over the last month. So thank you all for having me. And for those who are in MENA, I hope to be able to collaborate with you guys in my now actual day job. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Zara. That was very helpful. And I think it was helpful as well to point out Lois's contact and details. Lois is going to be coming on next to talk about activity 3.5, and she will talk about the process to inform her of engaging with the case studies, but also of other activities that might be going on. So thank you all very much. We're going to take a break now. Unfortunately, it's going to be shorter than we thought, but let's resume here at 15:45. So thanks all for your attention to this moment, and we'll see you again in about 10 minutes. Okay. I hope you all managed to get a cup of tea or something in the meantime. We are going to now introduce the case studies. So Lois Austin is going to be providing an update on the status of thematic case studies related to COVID-19 and humanitarian cash and social protection. She's going to talk about the methodology that was used, the thematic areas they're looking at the moment, and the process that you can follow after this webinar in order to engage with the case studies. So Lois, I hope you're there. Over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Emma. So yes, I mean, Emma said I'm going to update you on the progress of the case studies. It's fairly limited at this stage, but we're hoping that after this discussion, we can really pick up speed around that. So as Zara mentioned in the previous session, when she was running through various of the activities, the KML activities, one of the deliverables is a set of 5 case studies with the objective of trying to scale up knowledge management and learning in response to COVID-19, ensuring that members of the subgroup as well as the wider community have up-to-date information on approaches and emerging good practice to assist in linking humanitarian cash transfers with social protection and vice versa. So building on all that KML work that's been undertaken so far, starting with that 2019 assessment of needs, which Zara talked about, the topics for the case studies have been developed. And we've also been looking at some of the issues that we're hoping to bring into the case studies through the monthly webinars that Sarah mentioned as well. So just looking there at the overarching theme that we are suggesting for the case studies, we are aiming for them to illustrate successes and challenges in linking humanitarian cash transfers and social protection in response to COVID-19. And really highlighting some of the challenges and difficulties in making those links in order to shed light on where theory doesn't always translate into practice, as well as illustrating successes where it has been possible to make the links and to highlight how and why this has been achieved. So what we've done under that theme is try and use some of the existing frameworks and adapting them slightly for the purpose of the case studies to ensure that each study will focus on different aspects of delivering and linking humanitarian cash and social protection under three main headings, as you can see there, of the first one being policy, secondly design, and the third one is implementation or operations. So before going into a bit more detail on that and the topics that you can see beneath those three main headings there, just to touch a little bit on the methodology of the case studies. So the case studies are intended to illustrate the inherent challenges and opportunities of linking humanitarian cash and social protection, and to tease out some generalizable cross-context learning in order to then ensure that each case study has sufficient scope in terms of context and coverage in terms of subgroup members' involvement, as well as range in terms of stakeholder voices that we can include in each case study. We would like each case study to comprise experience from at least 4 different subgroup member agencies. So they will all be multi-agency case studies. Experiences from up to 4 different operational contexts or countries. So they will also be multi-country or multi-context case studies. And then the inclusion of at least 8 to 10 key informant interviews per agency, per case study. So as well, we'd look at focus group discussions to provide the opportunity to include more stakeholder voices. So you'll see there the 5 case study topics that we're looking at under the 3 main headings. And if we could just go on to the next slide, I'll go into that in a bit more detail. Thank you. So breaking down the 3 overarching case study topics of policy, design, and operations or implementation, each case study will focus on different subtopics to ensure that the learning within them is both tangible and realistic for practitioners. And we will be getting the practitioners, we hope, are going to be the ones developing the content. So that should help them to be more tangible and move away a little bit from some of the more theoretical discussions that have taken place so far. So you can see there the different subtopics within each of the case studies. So we would intend to have one case study focusing only on the policy aspects. So you can see there, this is financing, legal and policy frameworks, etc. A second case study which will focus on design and operations or implementation. So this is the vulnerability and poverty assessment, market and price analysis, and monitoring and evidence. The third case study will focus only on the design elements. I'm not going to read them out, you can see them there. And then we'll have 2 case studies which will focus only on operations or implementation, broken down, as you see there. And across all the case studies, we should be trying to highlight gender and inclusion perspectives where possible. So just moving on to the next slide, please, to run through a bit on methodology and build a bit on what I just said at the beginning. So as I mentioned, the idea is that each case study will illustrate examples of humanitarian cash transfers and social protection linkages, primarily in relation to COVID-19 interventions from a range of different contexts, and including the experience of a number of different agencies in order to ensure a broad scope and coverage. Each case study will involve primary and secondary data collection, and this will be done through reviewing existing documentation developed in response to COVID-19, but we'll also take a look at relevant resources that were generated before the pandemic, which highlight linkages between humanitarian cash transfers and social protection, because there we have quite some learning about approaches that have worked and haven't worked. For each case study, relevant documentation, which is going to be set at a maximum of 10 to 15 documents per case study, will be gathered to cover respective agencies and context. And evidence will be drawn out and mapped against each one of the core overarching questions or themes, so helping to surface learning that we can test later through the key informant interviews. And as I mentioned, we'll do about 8 to 10 key informant interviews per study. In terms of content, and this is where the member agencies come in, the idea is that subgroup member agencies will co-lead the case study process, with one agency co-leading a case study in collaboration with the KML consultants, which is me. So this is where we're looking for volunteers actually, and we're looking for agencies to put themselves forward for co-leads for each one of the 5 case studies. And so just to give an indication of what this means, could we go on to the next slide, please? Actually, no, sorry, can we go back? You can see, no, forwards, backwards and forwards to the next one we had up. Other direction, please. I'm being very confusing, sorry, back one.
Sorry.
There, that's it. Oh no.
This one?
No, the other one, that one.
Okay.
Thank you, sorry about that, my fault. So just in terms of the roles for the co-leads for each of the case studies. So for the subgroup members that would like to put themselves forward to co-lead a case study, the role will be to help develop the key informant interview list for their study, and to source and undertake the document review, and set up and undertake interviews, and to write up the content of the case study. And we envisage each case study being 5 to 8 pages long. So they are illustrative of what works and what doesn't work. And then my role will be to develop the case study methodology to ensure that there's a commonality across all the studies, and to provide any guidance that the co-lead member agencies need. And I'll also support in drawing up the key informant interview list to ensure that across the case studies we don't have too many voices from one agency or one type of agency and not enough from another. So to try and ensure that there's a good representation of agencies across the studies. And I'll also be involved in the selection of the context to be covered within each case study, again to make sure that we don't overdo one context and leave out other important ones. And before the process starts, I'll be involved in defining criteria to help establish the relevance of documentation to be reviewed, so that should support the co-leads in making sure that we're looking at the right documentation. Learning from each of the case studies is then going to be used to inform the development of a synthesis note, which will propose recommendations for future action. So if we could have the next slide, please, which should be the final slide. So just in terms of next steps, if you are able to take a look at the topics for each case study, and it'd be interesting as well to have a bit your thoughts on those topics and whether there's support for those topics. But to think about whether your agency would be interested in co-leading on a study, then please do send me an email directly. You can see my email there up on the slide. Or if you're interested in contributing to a case study or a specific element of a case study, but your agency doesn't have the capacity to take a co-lead role, please also do contact me. And if you could be in contact by the end of Friday, the 31st of July, so the end of next week, this is going to allow us enough time to identify which agencies will co-lead on which case studies, and then we can really start the work in full. We have until the end of November to actually finalize all the case studies, but also the synthesis note. So actually the deadline for finalizing the case studies is probably more like end of October, to just give enough time to then write up the synthesis note. So I'll end it here, but I very much look forward to hearing from anybody who's interested in being involved. And yeah, I open it up to questions now.
So perhaps we could begin, Lois, with some questions. Does anybody have questions about the case studies or the process that's going to be gone through, and then we can move to sort of feedback on the thematic areas that have been chosen and so on. So first of all, any questions for clarification?
Hello, this is Catherine from World Vision. Thank you so much for this, Lois, really helpful. My question would be, as we see the different blocks or buckets that you have outlined, which I think is really helpful, there is one component where we look at do no harm. My question was, are we looking at different contexts, not only different phases of the cash transfer, social protection cycles, life cycles, but are we also looking at different contexts, for example, fragile contexts, because this is something World Vision obviously is quite interested in working in and contributing to or co-leading a study. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, and I think this is really important that we do try to the extent possible to cover the different types of context where we're trying to make these links and implement these interventions so that they are of broad use. But I think perhaps what hasn't been thought through is whether there will be one case study on, for example, fragile contexts. I haven't seen it like that, but rather bringing out within one case study 4 or so different countries or contexts where we can look at each of the subcomponents and compare contexts, but also bring out cross-context learning. I hope that answers the question, Catherine.
Great. Is there any other feedback from the group on the thematic areas that are being looked at in the case studies?
This is Lara Evans, USAID. Just a question to add on sort of on top of the context, but curious if we'll take into consideration sort of the different stages of establishment of social protection systems. So in a place where, you know, you have a very nascent system or sort of an emerging practice or a more established one, I think those are kind of key factors to consider as well in terms of how humanitarian assistance would connect with systems at their various capacities within the country context. Thanks.
Thank you, Lara. That's noted as something to take on board so that, again, we can try and identify examples of, yes, what's happened in practice in different contexts where the systems are in different phases of development.
Great, thanks. And any more feedback?
Yes, Emma, this is Juan Gonzalo from WFP, and hello, Luis. I would like to know a little bit more, maybe if you could go back to explaining how do you envision the process of doing this and the key informant interviews? Who would be part or who would conduct this? Thank you.
Thanks, Juan Gonzalo. Yes, the idea is that the agencies that are co-leading, and when I say co-leading, the co-lead is the agency itself, and I mean, not me as a person, but me as a representative of the subgroup. So the co-agency, the co-lead agency will be responsible for undertaking the key informant interviews, but the list of key informants would have to be discussed with me, because I would then have a view over all the case studies just to make sure that we are getting sufficient representation across the board. But it would be the responsibility of the agency co-leading to actually undertake the interview process. I would also, though, be supporting in the development of the interview guides, so again that we can have a common approach across the studies, which will help us to identify any trends or kind of similarities that we see across all of them. Over.
Thanks, Lois. And there's a couple of questions in the chat. Jackie's asked if the thematic case studies may mean a country context could be reflected in more than one theme.
Yes, thanks, Jackie. I think that's absolutely a possibility. I mean, ideally, we get quite a broad range of country and context examples, but of course there are countries where we're going to be able to draw some really strong learning, which are going to be able to contribute to different case studies. Could be reflected in more than one case study.
Great. And then Ruby has asked, does financing also include budgeting as well, or will that be tackled separately? I assume that's in relation to the financing under policy.
Yes. Maybe, sorry, Ruby, could you just clarify for me what you mean, what the difference is between budgeting and financing from your perspective?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to find out if, you know, just like the budget for programming and social assistance for, I mean, the financing is more of the source of funding, right? So it's within, so the budgeting of like structuring of the budget for programs is basically what my question was about. I don't know, sorry if that wasn't clear.
No, sorry, that's fine. So you're absolutely right. And actually, we don't have budgeting in there. So I'm going to take a note of it, and then we can come back and see if that's a topic that we should include or a subtopic, then we can see which area it would fit best in. So it'd be interesting to hear from people, whether now or if you email me directly, if you feel that that's potentially a gap in the case studies and in the case study topics that we should try and address and incorporate.
Thanks. Any final feedback from anyone? So from Ali, will case studies also look into financial infrastructure delivery mechanisms? I think delivery mechanisms is mentioned under operations and implementation, and data sharing and data protection.
Yeah, so you're right, Emma, delivery mechanisms is in there. I can't seem to see it now because half my screen's blocked.
Last one under operations and implementation.
There we go. Yeah, payments and delivery, exactly. And data sharing and data protection comes again probably under the previous operations and implementation case study, but I think it's also, so if you see do no harm protection and grievance, I would include data protection mechanisms in there, but I think we might also be able to include it in design and setting up some of those mechanisms as well.
Great, thank you. And any further feedback?
Can I just quickly come in here, Emma and Lois, if that is okay?
Sure.
Nupur?
Yeah.
I just wanted to flag that this is what Louis is presenting now is a proposal. So we haven't started work on this. So if there are any issues or ideas that we need to consider or drop, please feel free to say that now, or maybe later reach out to Louis. There are some very interesting and useful inputs that are coming in. So please keep sending them through, and we will try, before we finalize, we will include and try and include almost all of them in the case studies when we finalize. Over.
Great, thanks for that clarification. So we are still at the proposal stage. Somebody's made a comment about data sharing can go under the legal and policy framework, as well as under targeting. And information systems are a component across all 4 of the case studies. So I think much of these comments, which are really helpful, would be great if you can also email those to Lois so that she can, just formulate a list of the feedback that's been given and incorporate as much as she can into the next step. Any further feedback while we're still on this topic? Otherwise, we'll move on. Thank you, Julie, for telling us about those 3 case studies. Okay, great. If you're not clear on the process, Andrea, could you just put the final slide up so that people have an opportunity to take Lois's email? Lois, thank you so much for telling us about that. And so please do get in touch if you want to co-lead or contribute to case studies, or also with any feedback that you have on the actual proposal as it stands at the moment.
Emma, this is Emily. I have a question, actually.
Sure.
Is that okay? Yeah, so about the case studies. So I was wondering if one of the ideas to test with the group was also whether we could have a kind of minimum common format for the case studies, so that, you know, if other members are doing case studies in the future or currently, it kind of adds to the body of work. Is that a question that we want to address, Lois, or?
So, as far as I understand it, you're saying that you'd come up with a sort of structure or a format for these case studies that could then be emulated by other case studies further down the road?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, exactly that.
Lois?
Yeah, I mean, the thinking hadn't gone that far. I do have in mind a structure for these case studies. I think it depends the extent to which the objectives of other case studies are going to be the same. But I do think it would be beneficial in terms of coherence that if other groups or agencies could also benefit from using the structure that we use for these 5 case studies. I think from a practitioner's perspective, having similar styles of documents is going to be much more helpful than trying to work your way through 5 or 6 different case study formats. So I mean, it's something that I would definitely support, and I would hope agencies could as well. And as I redesign the format, I can definitely have that in mind.
Great, and I guess it's also for, you know, when people feedback on the approach, that they also kind of think with about that when with the feedback, kind of would they use the format, you know, so both ways. Over.
Thanks, Emily. So how would you envisage the format being shared?
So in Lois's process, if at any point there is a, you know, checking in on the approach, making sure that people can have that in mind.
Maybe what we can do is share the format at the next bi-weekly KML meeting in advance of it, and then that gives people the chance to have a look over.
Yeah, that sounds good. Oh, and Zara's also made that comment. Okay, I'm just going to give a bit of space for any final interjections on this, and otherwise we're going to move on to the next part of this webinar. So any final comments for Lois? Brilliant. Well, once again, Lois, thanks so much. And we're going to move on now to the second part of about the 4th part actually of the webinar. And in this part of the webinar, what we really wanted to do is to try and agree on and amend the work plan with the aim of kind of finalizing it for 2020 to 2021. So the first question I'm going to ask people is, are there any activities that you feel are missing from the work plan as it stands in terms of the version you received from the co-leads prior to this webinar? Does anybody feel there are activities that are missing from the work plan? Well, I think that's marvelous. I'm taking it that that means there is agreement that there are nothing is missing, and we can proceed. So following on from that, the next logical question is, are there any activities that could or should be shelved?
Sorry, what do you mean by shelved?
Put in a work plan for a later point. So this work plan is for 2021. So by shelving, I mean just saying, yes, that's an important activity, but actually maybe we would do it in 2022, for example.
Yeah, we need to look again at it. Is there any deadline? Can we come back to you on that later if needed in the next? Do we have to take a decision now, or can we still look at it, back at it again? And because we didn't know. Yeah.
I'm going to throw that. Gabby, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, hi, Gabby. So if people have further thoughts about things on the work plan, can they get back to you? And if so, by what date would you need things?
I mean, yeah, please co-leads come in and confirm this. I would suggest perhaps another, let's say 2-week, 3-week window for comments, and certainly if we're talking about any activities that people are proposing to remove or to shelve, I would hope that they would be sort of jumping out, you know, relatively soon to people as things that need to be shifted. Yeah, let's say the end of the second week of August. Does that give people enough time to take a look through and get back to me with any burning issues that they don't want to raise here or haven't had time to, you know, raise
Yeah,
here?
that sounds reasonable, because for us, not that necessarily activities need to be shelved, but at least some of them need to be better understood, and in the light of that, then we can figure it out.
Of course, that's fine. Yeah.
But I think it will be, sorry for jumping in here. It will be good to have a deadline. We were really hoping that we will have some kind of consensus in this meeting. And that's the reason why the discussion note and the work plan was shared ahead of the meeting. But yes, if there is need for time, we do need to have some kind of a deadline so that we can say that this is our final work plan.
I think Caroline has made the suggestion of 31st of July, and that's the same deadline Lois is working to. I think that seems to be a good deadline because, as you say, I hopefully will be able to talk about quite a bit more in this meeting. But yeah, 31st of July, hopefully that would be acceptable to everyone. And Gabby, maybe you could drop your email address into the chat.
Into the chat, yeah, I'll do that now.
Great. Any other comments on the work plan as it stands at the moment before we sort of move to going through some of the activities in a bit more specifically?
Hi Emma, this is Carla from UNICEF. Just a little comment I made on the chat box as well. I'm just wondering if, and maybe this has been discussed and has been shelved in the past, but I'm wondering if other than engaging with humanitarian actors like the IASC, as well as the CASH working group, I'm wondering if we're missing as well the link with social protection coordination actors. And since, you know, it takes two to tango, right? It takes the humanitarians to link up with social protection actors, but it also takes equally social protection actors to be aware of what humanitarian actors are doing, how their coordination mechanisms are, and how they can link up with us as well. I'm just wondering if that's something that perhaps could be included in there, or has been overlooked, or there's a reason why it's not there. Over.
Thank you, Carla. I mean, that is actually a subject that we were thinking about discussing at the next webinar. Co-leads, is there anything you'd like to respond to Carla on that, about engaging other actors?
Sorry, Emily, go ahead.
No, so I'm just looking at the engagement area 2 and the activity 2.2. So it's a red activity, which is a newly proposed activity, where we were trying to figure out what would be where this group would have a comparative advantage and an added value in terms of fostering coordination. One of the points was around DISC, because we wondered if that was a way of formalizing coordination between the two sides. So here we're not talking about, how do we bring social protection topics within the cash coordination and the humanitarian coordination, but we are talking about bringing formal linkages between humanitarian structure and social protection coordination mechanisms. That being said, maybe, Carla, the question is, how do we adapt or how do we reflect your point within this activity? Nupur, you wanted to come in, so maybe you can also.
No, I just wanted more clarity on the question, actually, because the actors that work on social protection are also represented in this group here. So just wanted a bit more clarity on what exactly Carla is referring to.
Emma, could I make a comment here? It's Gabby.
Sure.
Hey, so under also just before Carla comes in, under the activities under advocacy, I think it's 4.2. There is an activity which is quite broadly defined at the moment. It's one of the new proposed activities. It's highlighted in red around influencing different groups, and I mean that's where I would see these sorts of conversations happening, and as you said before, we were thinking of having this as one of the topics to sort of flesh out further in a forthcoming webinar, because it will need more detailed engagement than is possible today with everything else we've got on the agenda. Just to flag that.
Great, thanks, Gabby. And Carla, can you provide any further clarification on your point?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. No, I think Nupur is correct. And I was just referring mostly to 2.1 and 2.2 on the work plan, which is basically adapting cash working group TORs to incorporate linking it with national social protection working groups where they exist. And 2.2, develop strategic level recommendations to the ISC to foster coordination between humanitarian and social protection actors in countries. So I guess maybe a very practical one would be is there an SPWG TOR? And if those exist, then perhaps could we also adapt those TORs to make sure that the social protection working groups are also linking to the humanitarian cash actors, but that it was just a very small point on that. So, but if you feel, I think that Gabby covered it as well on point number 4. So it's a lot clearer, and the fact that Nupur mentioned that obviously all the social protection actors are also in this group, it's great. I'm just wondering if a lot of the work that we're doing on the humanitarian, on making sure that humanitarians are doing those linkages, that we're also ensuring we're doing the same to social protection actors as well. Over.
Thank you.
Hi all. This is Shawnee Hoover with USAID. I just wanted to jump in just because I know from our side, there were a number of questions around 2.1 and 2.2 where we just wanted to get kind of greater clarity on, kind of what aspects would be incorporated into the TORs or recommendations to the IAC. From our side, I would say we're particularly interested in seeing more alignment on transfer values and targeting while ensuring, very strong protections of international humanitarian laws and principles. So that's just kind of a common thread. And so just looking at the work plan, it was hard to determine exactly what would be involved in those two activities. Over.
Great, thank you, Shawnee. So that was about further clarity on activity 2.1 and 2.2. I know, and I'm going to ask either Gabby or the co-leads to come in on that in a moment, but William, you also jumped in there. Do you have something, comment on that?
No, it was to make the same comment. Over, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So Gabby, would you like to provide further clarification on activities 2.1 or 2.2?
I can do it very succinctly in that there is no further information other than what is written there on the work plan. So these are, you know, the second one of 2.2 is it's a, you know, it's a new activity, it's a proposed activity, and really if it's I would say it's for the group to decide, you know, if it's going to be included in the work plan, what areas you want to develop concrete asks for. And for the first one, for 2.1 around adapting cash working groups, again, everything that's happened to date, there has been action, but it's been ad hoc. So as yet there isn't anything that we could say concretely has started as a subgroup activity. So again, there's still scope here to reflect collectively on what we want to achieve. That said, you know, things that have gone on sort of so far, and if anyone from CALP is still on the line, they could perhaps, you know, add further to what I'm going to say, and maybe correct me if things have moved on, because these conversations obviously happened a couple of months ago. But CALP has already been directly promoting, you know, the inclusion of certain clauses around the importance of linking with social protection into the terms of reference of national cash working groups. So it was really around, you know, whether that activity can become more formalized, whether other subgroup members can also start to, you know, to support that, and so that everyone has a sort of common stance on sort of what's being asked. So for example, CashCap was saying that, you know, that their sort of standard terms of reference, they could start to reflect the same standard asks and the standard terminology. But in terms of what those asks are, I would say, I'm happy to be corrected on this, that there's still scope to influence what we want to be saying. Hope that makes sense. Over to the rest of the group.
Great, thank you, Gabby. Co-leads, any further comments on those two activities, if we can stick with 2.1 and 2.2 for the moment? Great, okay. All right, lovely. I mean, I think, let's take Gabby's point that, and I'd like to deal with 2.2, as that is one of the new activities. And I wanted to go through the new activities and look at whether people agree to keep those included, and also to see if we get volunteers for people who would like to be involved in those specific ones. So, actually, before we go there, just Cal, are you still on the line?
Yes, hi, Viksha on the line. I think my colleague Julie might be here as well. Thanks.
I'm here as well, yeah.
Oh, hi. So I wondered if you had a comment to Gabby saying, has further work been done on either of those activities, 2.1 or 2.2, or I see you're down as a lead with question mark. So is that something you would still be pursuing in terms of 2.1?
I think these are fairly new pieces of work that we haven't yet started work on in a direct fashion. We have had 2 regional meetings so far, one in West Africa and one in East and Southern Africa. And as Diksha mentioned earlier, we have a meeting coming up for the MENA, the technical support to the MENA Regional Cash Working Group next week. So we are, you know, exploring further how to support the cash working groups, and we've been collaborating with OCHA and UNICEF on a sort of fairly ad hoc tip sheet to advise cash working groups on how they might coordinate better with social protection coordination mechanisms. So that's, I think, I mean, Diksha, you might, I don't know if you want to chip in something, because you are working in a region, I'm working globally, so you know more than I do on this. But I think it might be quite, I don't know if you've had a chance to look through this work plan before.
Yeah, so jumping in, Julie, haven't had a chance to look at this work plan before, but we are looking at our next sort of cash working group leads meeting perhaps later in the year, around, I think, yeah, a few months down the line, so we can definitely pick this up then as well.
Okay, so basically the activity 2.1 is being led by CALP. So any contributions should be sent to you.
I would like to take this back. As you see, there's a question mark beside our name. So I'd like to discuss it further with the rest of the team. And I think this probably does, it is an area of work that we're keen to get engaged with, but I'd rather sort of delay saying a direct yes or no on that at the moment.
Okay, great. All right, and so you'll be communicating that. Do you have a sort of timeline in mind for when that you might decide about the leadership of the group?
Yeah, we'll try and get back to you within the next 2 or 3 weeks. We're a bit swamped at the moment with the State of the World's Cash launch on Thursday, so I can't talk to anybody till next week. And we'll have to look in more depth at the work plan, see where else we're committed, what else we've got going on. So give us a little bit of time, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Moving to 2.2 then, which is the develop strategic level recommendations to the IASC to foster coordination between humanitarian and social protection actors in country. As we said, this is a new activity, so I'd just like to hear from the whole group if anybody feels this is an activity that should not be there on the work plan.
So this is Shawnee with USAID. We don't want to be a naysayer, but we don't really quite understand what we would be asking the IASC to do exactly. So it just needs to be fleshed out, and it could potentially be that we say shelve it for now if we have other more pressing priorities. Over.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from people about this particular activity?
Hi, this is Emily from DFID.
Emily, go ahead, and then I'll take the other person.
Sure. So I guess I would go back to the problem statement to see whether, you know, maybe the way 2.2 is phrased or proposed is the right direction. But I guess the problem statement is whether adapting and updating the terms of reference of cash working groups will be sufficient to see coordination between humanitarian and social protection actors in countries. And I think one of the issues that we have started hearing is whether technical coordination is sufficient and whether we should start seeing more strategic coordination, and whether the HCRCs needs to start having understanding basically what it is and why it matters. So I guess the question from my side is, if we agree that the coordination question is a broader question to the technical one and to terms of reference, and of course there is a lot that needs to be done in countries, and maybe we need to reflect on what this group can do, but whether there is more needed from a strategic perspective, and what would be the activity that would help us push for, would help us for a greater and more effective coordination over. So just maybe going back to the problem statement and whether that's the right activity. Over.
Okay, thank you. So the problem statement is basically about this coordination between the humanitarian and social protection actors in country. There's been a lot of suggestions in the chat regarding HCTs. I mean, it seems to me that if this is at the country level, HCTs also seem to be a good aim. Perhaps you could lobby the HCRC retreat in November. But it seems that the problem statement seems to have come up quite a lot in unrelated chats in this webinar. So it seems as though that problem statement still needs to be addressed, but it's whether these strategic level recommendations to the ISC are appropriate. Many people seem to be suggesting it should be IASC plus HCT. Any comments on this activity, on what the discussion to date?
Emma, is Otcha on the line?
I'm not sure actually. Otcha, are you there? Calling Otcha.
I thought Juliet was on the call in the earlier on.
She was earlier. I can't. Let me just check. I
It
can't
was.
see her now. No, and that's a shame because this is something where Otcha may be the ones to lead, and they're certainly the ones in the best position if we're releasing.
It was them that. Yeah, it was that. It was Louise Gensel that I talked to, and it was it was their recommendation to include it, to propose it as an activity that could be, you know, a group activity if other group members thought it was something useful. And I think the idea is, you know, is to try, as I've written in that notes column, it's to try and influence, but at a global level, so that it's consistent. The you know, future HRP strategic planning processes. So that was the intention, was to try to go from, I think at the moment she said that there's some sort of very sort of generic reference to social protection in the HRP documentation in the planning process, and but there's no guidance, there's no sort of follow through, engaging with what do we need to be thinking through, how do we think that through, what tools do we need, and so they might be the sorts of things that this subgroup could influence on by saying, putting a piece together and seeking to sort of raise awareness as a starting point, and then have a few sort of concrete asks for ways that guidance could be improved. That was how I understood it when I spoke with her. I don't know if that clarifies things, you know, a little bit more for people, or if it's still something that people think needs to be revised.
I think what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is that there is agreement around the fact that there needs to be work done on strengthening coordination between humanitarian and social protection actors. So I think we've agreed that. I think perhaps what hasn't been agreed is that it may not be only recommendations or guidance to the IASC, it should also be to HCTs.
Right.
And perhaps this needs to just be tightened up in that way. I mean, OCHA would certainly be the best agency to take that forward.
Hi, sorry, Emma, this is Juliet.
Oh, Juliet, hi, yes.
Yes, I really apologize. I had to take an urgent call on the side, so unfortunately I had to leave the meeting, but I've just come back online now as I was being mentioned, and I just wanted to check and confirm whether or not you needed support from our side.
Sorry, you wanted to ask what?
Sorry, you said that you mentioned that you wanted an OCHA rep to speak to something. I literally just logged back in, so with apologies, I've missed about 35 minutes of the call so far.
Okay, no problem. We're basically on this issue, which is activity 2.2, develop strategic level recommendations to the IASC to foster coordination between humanitarian and social protection actors in countries. So I believe this is something you've spoken about, or OCHA has spoken about with Gabby, and that's why this activity is here. I believe there's broad consensus in the group that are attending the webinar at the moment that indeed there is a need to strengthen coordination between those actors. I think the query is about the best way to do that, and is this indeed the right activity, or should there be additional activities to strengthen coordination? And then the other thing is OCHA are down as a potential lead on this, so is that indeed the case? And yes, your comments on that basically.
Sure. So firstly, yeah, we're happy to be one of the kind of co-leads on this as well in terms of bringing it forward. I'm just reopening the work plan at the moment, but in terms of that linkage and that kind of coordination, I think, again, with apologies, I dropped off about 35 minutes ago, but I'm pretty sure that Diksha was referring to a piece of work that CALP is doing in Vienna, and just to say, obviously, OCHA is doing a similar piece of work, which is we're doing 2 cash reviews for 2 countries to map out what will be the opportunities and linkages of bringing together humanitarian cash program and social protection. So we have 2 cash reviews, and our hope is that we would also be kind of using that to leverage some best practices moving forward. So it would seem that yes, there would be, it would be a good place to start in terms of kind of putting together some of the best practices and how that would.
Juliet, you're breaking up slightly. Could you repeat that last bit?
Yeah, so I think I had just finished in terms of talking about the 2 cash reviews that we are doing kind of in parallel to the piece of work that CALP is doing. So based on that, we would hopefully be coming out with a little bit of clarity in terms of what is best practices as to the practicalities of how you would bring the coordination between those 2 sets of actors a little bit closer together. We're more than happy to participate in those activities. One thing I would say is that without wanting to get too nebulous or too large in this discussion, what we have realized is that when we are looking already at some examples, these conversations are wrapped up in other discussions about, generally speaking, how development actors and humanitarian actors engage, and what space there is in order to be, or what platform is used to engage within that. So we are happy to kind of participate in some of these activities and bringing it into the ISC or some of those discussions. It could be a good idea. It would need to be framed within that broader discussion of the overall nexus as well, to avoid it just sitting outside as a kind of a standalone piece of work. But that would be my initial take on some of the activities. Thanks. Over.
Great, thank you, Juliet. It sounds to me as though it would fit very well in the nexus discussions. Just to note that a lot of people were talking about not just the IASC, but also the HCTs. So I'm going to I think we need to move on now. So I'm just going to conclude this with saying that we agree that there should be activity around this, that OCHA are taking the lead, and that if people would like to pursue this further or would be interested in being included in this activity, then they contact Juliet. Is that okay, Juliet?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Could you drop your email into the chat?
I'll do so right now.
Thanks. And Gabby, did you have something you wanted to come on with? Gabby? Maybe not.
Emma, just to jump in, I mean, in the chat box, we had a bit of an exchange, and there is an appetite to phase maybe the activities and see if we could start with recommendations to HCTs and then move on to the IASC piece if we see entry points. So yeah, just to acknowledge the exchanges on the chat. Over.
Great, Emily, thank you for that. Yeah, I've noted that. Okay, shall we move on? What I'm going to do is just look specifically for the time being at the very new activities. So the next activity that's new, and I believe Zara really covered a lot of the engagement area 3, but I would like specifically to look at maintain a roster of experts. This is 3.7, activity 3.7, maintain a roster of experts to advise planning and delivery of linkages. The first question to the group is this something useful to include in the work plan? So develop a roster of experts or maintain a roster of experts to advise planning and delivery of linkages. So somebody said yes. Thank you, Lara, if that is indeed response to this. Any objections to this being on? And I wanted to ask, is Cash Cap online? Anybody from Cash Cap?
Hi Emma, this is Jackie Fries. There are a number of us on the call.
Oh, good, thank you. is anyone in a position to answer the question about whether that would be something that could come under cash, that CashCap could lead on?
I think the project manager, Mamta, is not on the call at the moment, but Marga might be able to step in. I just feel she's got connection issues. Marga, can you answer on behalf of the group? I know she's trying to answer. No sign of Marga. I know she's on the call. I don't want to respond for her because she'd be be best informed. But I'm assuming it's Gabby. Is that something that came up in the interviews with the CashCap project manager?
Gabby? I think everyone's a bit stuck at the moment. Okay, so we're going to leave.
Sorry, I'm back online. Sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah, Mamta was quite forthcoming on a number of areas. That wasn't one that I talked about with her. It's one that came from Zara's consultations with the KML work plan. So it does still need CashCap's sort of input, but it is in line with a number of the other things that she said would be feasible. But I don't want to put words in her mouth.
Okay, great. So
we'll get back to you then. I guess that's the safest.
Yes, that's getting back to us. Okay. All right. Just quickly before I move on to the next activity, anybody violently object to activity 3.7? Marvelous. Let's move on to 3.8. So activity 3.8, I have a massive work plan on my door here. Activity 3.8 is organising subgroup events to share and discuss learning. So I'm hired basically to do 3 of these webinars at the moment. But I suppose that is whether the group sees that there's validity of webinars of this nature. I mean, not necessarily run by me, obviously, but webinars of this nature, allowing the subgroup to meet up, are a valid and, desirable thing. So is there any feedback on that, the value of continuing webinars like these? So, okay, so I've got a couple of comments here, but not to discuss work plans, but to share info and learning. I think, though, I agree, as some people are saying yes. There is another activity, which is activity 3.1, which is deliver webinars to share and discuss learning. So I see, and those are the ones that Lois will be running on behalf of UNICEF, well, the whole group, but under her UNICEF role. So I would see those as more the sort of thematic, etc., whereas I would see these as being more sort of about the subgroup work, so not specifically the work plan, but how activities are progressing. So, having an opportunity for people to coordinate around that. So if I've got this totally wrong, one of the co-leads can jump in there. The other option is one would have, once COVID has died down, one could go back to face-to-face meetings. But so yeah, so anybody violently feel that we shouldn't have these webinars, or that the 2 different webinar activities should be linked?
I think so. It's William speaking. You said I think it depends on the objective we want to reach with these webinars. As long as we are strategic with it, to not like, for example, if it's to build a common understanding of technical terminologies around social protection and linkages with humanitarian assistance, yes. If it's about engagement with governments, yes. So as long as we are intentional about the strategy behind it, yes.
Okay, thank you, William. Anybody else, any quick comments on that one?
Here, Emily, so from the comments, I'm hearing that people would like more workshopy type rather than webinar in the sense being talked at. Is a sense that I'm getting from the comments. Please disagree in the chat if I have not understood well. Over.
Thanks, Emily. We're having a comment from Robin, maybe call these workshops to have a clearer distinction. Would be helpful to include national and regional SPWG leads too. So I'm generally sensing that there's agreement that we could have webinars, and obviously they are completely optional. So I'm hearing agreement that yes, but that membership may be broadened and country level and regional level SPWG leads could be included, and that there could be cross-country learning and discussion forums. I mean, I think that's a great suggestion. I do think there are other opportunities potentially to do that. But so what I'm hearing at the moment is in terms of activity 3.8, yes, but it needs to be clearly distinguished from activity 3.1. So there's a good distinction.
Mm.
Okay, if anybody disagrees with my conclusion on that, please do send a chat. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. I'm worried that we do need to close at 5. The final new activity, which has already been brought up, is 4.2, which is advocacy for influencing global practices. We have already said that we can go into this one in more detail in the next webinar, but just right now, does anybody have any particular feedback on that?
Yes.
Yes, William.
Yeah, William. Perhaps just to echo the comment made at the beginning of the webinar about we are supporting the linkages, but also it's about like making sure there is a diversity of point of view included in the advocacy, or at least that the rule is clear regarding how to include this diverse point of view. And that will be linked, to the work on the TOR, I imagine, to know how we include these different points of view. So why not, as long as we consider, I mean, for sure, but as long as we consider this caveat. And also making sure that there's a safeguard in terms of making sure humanitarian assistance is considered, because from our experience, what we see is there's a risk of that the resources dedicated for humanitarian assistance are diverted for non-humanitarian assistance needs. So making sure this safeguard is here will be critical for this activity.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Again, I think, so by silence, I'm taking acquiescence that it should be here. Probably needs to be tightened up quite a bit, and then that can be something that we do at the next, during the next webinar. I'm going to move on and now just come back to a couple of the activities that we haven't really covered. So 1.1, which is conduct a mapping of linkages between humanitarian CVA and social protection in different contexts and analyze to understand gaps, barriers, and opportunities. So I believe, Kalp, if you're still there, you've started this. Do you have, or perhaps I'll open this up to the group. Do the group have ideas on what sort of analysis or final product might be the most useful to have, and is there any interest to assist in securing the funding? So in terms of this mapping of linkages, what sort of product or what sort of output, what sort of analysis and what output do people feel would be useful for them?
So are you talking about the mapping here?
Yes, activity 1.1.
1.1, you came back to that. Okay, so for us, it was perhaps, it's more a question is, how do we make sure it's complementary with the World Bank mapping? It seems to me there are like overlaps between these two mappings. I know they are also different, but I can see some overlaps. So as long as we are covering, you know, the complementarity of these and not duplicating, it would be great. Over.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you. And
can I jump in? This
sure.
is Julie from KELP. So we were making some progress on this with quite a few of the people in this meeting until February. I mean, there was a lot of debate about what was the use of such a mapping, who would use it, and were there in fact more cleverer, more useful ways to bring information together. And in fact, the whole process of this was very helpful because it got us talking to social protection in crisis at sp.org, and it got us talking to this group, the leads of this group more closely. However, we suspended activities on that mapping at the beginning of COVID-19. There was so much other mapping going on, it didn't seem particularly useful. And we've been having a major we had a major report recently to advise us on what direction to take in going forward with social protection and CVA linkages. And now we're coming out the other side of that and thinking about their recommendations. And one of the recommendations was to work very closely with the Grand Bargain Group and with socialprotection.org. But I do think we need to, I think there's a lot of potential in mapping, but it needs to be if possible, something that we collaborate closely with sp.org on, and also with other Grand Bargain members, because we have to think about what it's useful for. And there is so much going on at the moment. I think we have to look seriously at what would be useful before we think about where to get funding for it.
Okay, thank you, Julie. So what I'm gathering is that there's an awful lot of mapping going on at the moment, and perhaps it's better to pause this particular activity until it's clearer what the results from the other mapping is going to be, from the World Bank mapping. I'm not sure what other mappings are happening, but is that the general consensus I'm hearing, to sort of pause this until we're more sure of how it will contribute to other parallel processes?
So,
Daphne.
Hi, this is Daphne Jasinger from International Rescue. So I think I agree with it being important to identify the purpose of the mapping. And I know that there are a lot of mappings happening at the moment. But I think from the IRC's perspective, there's a lot of faith being put in the ability of social protection systems to respond as part of the COVID recovery. And we, on the humanitarian side, know that there are a lot of gaps, and that there will be a lot of populations that will be excluded, particularly in fragile contexts. And that's where the mapping could identify where that unmet need is. And that's something we're concentrating on. So in that respect, the sooner that happens, the better. I know the sort of bank mapping, but I'm not sure that is necessarily, unless it's something that I don't know about, necessarily identifying the unmet need that humanitarians are sort of ready to meet.
Okay, so thank you, Daphne, but so please to sort of carry on.
Yes, and sorry to jump on to echo that, we tend to agree. For us, it's not a matter of like postponing it necessarily. It's just making sure we're not conflating social protection and humanitarian assistance cash, and being very careful with that, as the previous person said before, to make sure we are covering the gap, and the humanitarian needs. So it's more about that rather than delaying the mapping. Over.
Okay.
Could I jump in?
Who is
Julie again. I mean, I think we can be very sure that in the majority of fragile and conflict-affected countries, that social protection systems aren't able to cover the level of need, and that we do need humanitarian cash. And I think the World Bank mapping is quite useful. They've recently released a very large Excel spreadsheet, and you can identify, the fragile and conflict-affected countries, or the poorest countries here, and you see how few social protection programs there are there. So I don't think we need a mapping to tell us that. I think that's already clear. And I think this actually shows how everybody's got their own idea about what mapping is for, and what you could use it for, and what you could achieve with it. And and I think first we need to look at what we've got and think about why we need it. And possibly something like saying, where is there an inadequate social protection response? We could probably do it in a couple of hours with this group. That's maybe not what we need it for, if we need it.
Hi, here, Emily.
Emily.
Yeah, just a point. So I think Hugo Gentilini, who is one of the people with UNICEF and others doing the mapping, is the first one to say that what this mapping doesn't do is look beyond social protection, and it doesn't look at the linkages with humanitarian cash, and it doesn't look at humanitarian cash. So there is a huge kind of gap, and he's the first one to point out that in Africa, for example, you only have 2% of all the measures that he's mapping in Africa, et cetera, So basically we have a part of the world that is not fully represented in terms of what are the measures that are happening there. So there is a mapping that Zara was doing and that Lois is doing right now, and which is trying to address that gap of looking at where the linkages between humanitarian cash and social protection are taking place, which was recognized by the people from the World Bank as a gap in mapping. So I'm just wondering, I just would like not to lose, from my perspective, so as a party in this group, not to lose the mapping element, because it's recognized as a gap. Over. So happy to hear views, but yeah, keen not to lose it. Over.
Sorry, I'm just going to go ahead and just to also say, because we know from the GB subgroup mapping that we were doing, that all of us are doing, because I was doing it on behalf of this group, is, even ILO said, loads of people, because I would keep asking every 2 weeks, is it still useful? Is it still useful? Is it still useful? And it was. So it could be something that temporarily the Grand Bargain subgroup continues to do through Lois. And it was absolutely identified as a gap, and the mapping is live out there. This is how Ali and I met. This is how I kept meeting a lot of the cash working group people as well. And the difference with the mapping that this group was doing is that anybody could access it and go in it and fill it out. So it was serving several different purposes, actually, indirectly, to get cash working groups in the country to also talk to other actors, figure out who they needed to talk to, be able to see what was happening in other countries, et cetera, et cetera. So I know I'm not part of this group anymore, but my recommendation would be if you're looking at that section over there, because CALP was doing this kind of a mapping, I hear Julie very clearly, it needs to be decided, what are we doing it for, what is it? For right now, and up to, I've not checked this with the co-leads, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it, to continue to do this under the KML thing for the subgroup, the way that we already have it, and then start to figure out, right, so what is the next iteration of this, and that could be the CALP mapping and where it's going, and see what other actors are thinking within this group in terms of what could be useful. Over.
Okay, thanks, Zara. I'm not sure Lois is going to be so thrilled about the additional work. I think CALP took on the British Red Cross mapping to further develop. but it is likely that the GB subgroup mapping is now the more useful one. I think what I'm hearing is that, yes, this is something that you want to continue with. But Julie is saying that CALP may well take it forward, but need for further discussion. Oh, it is already part of the KML work. Okay, well, so I think it's Julie and Lois, I think they're going to have to liaise. I think also if anybody else would like to contribute, that would be helpful. And if you do want to contribute, you can drop into the chat box that you would contribute. Okay, so good. Please, that's been advanced. Right, I have two quick more activities to look at and then we're going to wrap up. And these both basically are concerned with CALP. So Julia, I hope you're still there, but there were two things around. The first one is activity 2.1, which is about adapting the cash working group TORs to incorporate linking with national SPWGs where they exist. And the second one was about activity 5.2, which is develop or refresh training. So I was just wondering if you could give us an update on where you are with that, and any comments or people who want to volunteer to support CALP and others with this would be gratefully received. So Julia, are you still there?
I am, yes. Yes, I'll start with the training because that's much more straightforward. We've recently developed 3 case studies and 1 major briefing note, thanks to Gabby, which I think it will be public access. It'll be shared next week on the 28th at the Regional Cash Working Group meeting that Diksha mentioned. And these are basically resources that could be used for anybody wanting to understand how CDA and social protection have been linked in the MENA region. So that's one contribution. My colleague Martin Pittman is leading on the revision of our social protection training. This was first designed by Nupur in 2016 and is now ready for revision because there are so many new frameworks and interesting examples. Now, these are pieces of work that CALP had funding for, and we've gone ahead already and commissioned this work. But as I mentioned earlier, one of our sort of big questions to ponder this year has been the extent to which we could bring our work, we could align and complement our work plan. So this has been discussed previously in the knowledge management groups and with the leads. So, and as I said before, with regard to the terms of reference with the cash working groups, I think this is something that we will discuss. One of the piece of work that's shortly coming out, developed with UNICEF and OCHA on, a little tip sheet to link how national coordinators in cash working groups might try and link up with social protection coordination mechanisms. That will be out shortly, and that's definitely something to share with the cash working groups and then to discuss with them, how to build this into terms of reference. I think in Northern Nigeria, it's already part of the cash working group terms of reference, but it's something to explore and think through. And, I'm happy to discuss this further with my colleagues. Until I'd seen the finalized work plan, I wasn't sure what was going to stay in and what was going to be taken out. And as I said, nobody's talking to anybody in CALP this week because of the state of the world cash. On Thursday, we are, people are not communicating. So that's as much as I can say on those at the moment. If Diksha wants to chip in, that'd be great, but sorry, I'm talking a lot.
Diksha? Diksha doesn't seem to be there.
Well,
right.
Sorry, I just put her on the spot a bit.
Thank you very much. So could I just ask, you have commissioned for an actual face-to-face training to be done, as well as all these case studies, briefing note and tip sheets?
Yeah, it's going to be a face-to-face study. We might look for further funding to put it online. And we're also commissioning, I should have mentioned, a further 3 case studies. This is being funded by the German Federal Foreign Office, and it's all for the MENA region. But we're thinking about, you know, other pieces of work in other regions that would, because it's very important to have regional examples to use when you're delivering a training. So we also need to review what we have available in other parts of the world. To some extent, we might be able to say to the Grand Bargain subgroup, you know, when your case studies come out, could we use those? So we have to explore these possibilities.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much for that update. So in fact, although it says not started, it actually is underway, that particular activity. So I would also ask group members here if they would want to volunteer, or if they have anything to contribute to that, to contact Julie. And then Julie, let's go to the other one, adapt the cash working group TORs. Have you got any updates on that one?
No, sorry, I thought I'd just covered it. We've just, with OCHA and UNICEF.
Oh, that's
yeah, that was it, yes.
Okay, fine. No, sorry, I thought that was the training, but that's great. Okay, does I'm going to finish there, because I think we've dealt with the majority of the activities. What I've heard from the group is that nobody objects violently to any of the activities, and in fact none should be shelved, but there did seem an appetite to tighten up a couple of them. Indeed, the strategic level recommendations to HCTs, ISCPs, and the advocacy, the activity 4.2 advocacy for influencing global practices also appears to need some more work. So I'm going to just say that we will be doing the second webinar shortly, and we haven't set a date yet, so we'll be circulating that date. Some of the things we're thinking of talking about is topics that have come up in this webinar, but around membership, so opening up the membership, but also localizing, engagement with other work streams to forward this area of work, and potentially a thematic issue, as well as a couple of tightening up on those activities I mentioned. So if no one has, I'm just looking, there's just a question come in. Sigrid is asking a question about the mapping. So I think with the mapping, that's a difficult one to answer now. Has anybody got an answer to Sigrid from ECHO around indirect cash and social protection links to UHC?
Hi, this is Emily. Sigrid, I'm just wondering whether you have seen the mapping that Zara initiated and that Lois is now carrying on. The link is in the newsletter, and I'm just wondering if that covers what you're referring to, or intends to cover what you're referring to. Over.
Sorry, actually, I missed the middle of the session. I had to, so I came back now. So sorry, I'm not sure I'm aware what you're talking about. Let me see.
Okay, we are just about to close this. So if anybody has a response to that, then perhaps they could drop the answer or an answer into the chat. Thank you all so much for coming, and I really want to apologize for running 10 minutes over, but it was great to have everyone here. What I would like to say is if you have suggestions for the next webinar, or you feel I didn't interpret what you mentioned well enough, please drop me an email, and there's my email address. But otherwise, I'd just like to thank everyone very much and look forward to seeing you all at the next webinar. Goodbye.